I've been stressed about how to cover this. This video is already really long, and I hope it's not repetitive, but so much has changed that I can kind of only work my way from the start again. I'll do my best to keep the pace up. As part of the 4th generation of Pokemon following Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, as they had with Red and Blue on the GBA, Gold and Silver were remade for the DS, with elements of Crystal included, as Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver versions. Heart Gold and Soul Silver bring Gold and Silver to the modern age of Pokemon at the time, although really not much has changed since then, with all the ups and downs that brings. The biggest changes are mechanical, and oh boy have things changed. While the basic battle mechanics are the same, even beyond new moves, a ton is going on behind the scenes. The stat experience system, which allowed eventually maxing out stats, has been changed a bit to allow only 2 stats to be maxed, as defeating a Pokemon now gives a set amount of points called EVs, with each Pokemon being able to have a max of 510, with each stat capping at 255. Which means the setup for EV grinding is lengthy and tedious, and Pokemon used during the story will be wholly fucked when it comes to EVs. The determinate value system, now called the IV system, is also moderately changed, but basically the same results. Pokemon have all their stats gain a bonus of 0 to 31 to determine how usable they are, essentially, at the time when they're captured. On top of this, natures are kind of a disaster of an idea, raising one stat at the cost of another, or being completely neutral, as another factor to juggle. So for example, Adamant increases attack while decreasing special attack. Great on some Pokemon, awful on others, so it's just another thing to balance when catching a Pokemon. It's a little more manipulable than IVs, but yeah. Lastly, for more backend stuff, all Pokemon now have an ability. For most Pokemon, one selected randomly from 2 options, although many Pokemon only have one single ability to choose from. These abilities tend to be passive effects that give advantages to the user, although some are a bit more active in their usage, and their effects are pretty wide and varied. On the more front-end stuff, moves aren't split into physical or special by type anymore, instead on a move-by-move basis. Surf is still a special water move, while Waterfall is now physical, which is a fantastic change, allowing for more builds, helped more by abilities, given some Pokemon were previously unfortunately not statistically aligned with their types some viability, and even allowing some Pokemon who have good enough stats in an area to utilize new coverage. Outside of these, changes to the gameplay are fairly minimal. The capture formula has been adjusted to be more stable, Great Balls are no longer better than Ultra Balls, plus there's new balls, like the arguably broken Dusk Ball, which has a massive bonus in caves and at night, so almost any Pokemon can be cheesed with a few hours of waiting. Double battles also exist now, 2 vs 2 battles with 4 Pokemon on the field at the same time, which allows for unique strategies and is the official competitive format, but unfortunately only appear in the game 5 or 6 times, and most of those are optional. The DS also allows touch navigation for menus and battles, as well as online battle and trade, although the official servers are now long gone, there are alternatives like Weemfee. Some types have new properties, although the matchup table is the same. Fire types are now completely immune to burn, when before they could be burned by Tri-Attack. Flying types can now be grounded via certain moves like Roost, which removes their ground immunity temporarily. Poison types are now fully immune to poisoning, while Twin Needle could poison them before. Additionally, poison types can remove the new entry hazard Toxic Spikes, which poisons a Pokemon on switch-in, if they're grounded when they switch in, so poison flying types like Zubat aren't capable of removing spikes. During a sandstorm, rock types have their special defense boosted by 50%. This sounds way better than it ends up being, since their special defense tends to be pretty pitiful, and they really suffer against largely special types like water. Ice types are now 100% immune to freezing, previously they were vulnerable to Tri-Attack, and like poison, the steel type is now immune to poison status in all forms. Lastly, there's a run button now, so there's no more walking indoors or before the bike. It makes things moderately faster in general, and I really appreciate it. It's the same game largely, and while natures and EVs aren't exactly positives, abilities, more variety in battles, the physical special split, and a faster pace in most aspects, especially because of the run button, are all great changes that make the game far easier to get into and way more engaging generally. I'll get more into how specific things have changed as I go, but Heart Gold and Soul Silver is a fantastic upgrade in most departments. Heart Gold and Soul Silver is it's really fucking nice looking. There's no other way to say it. In battle, sprites are crisp, colorful, varied, and very well posed. Art and sprite for monsters has become virtually indistinguishable, save the lower resolution obviously, which makes things so crisp and immersive. In the overworld, the game uses an interesting blend of 2D and 3D. The overworld itself is largely 3D, but characters and other overworld things, including the game's most famous edition, following Pokemon that traverse the overworld alongside the player, are all sprites, done in a cute chibi style. Not held back by the Game Boy Color cartridge, Heart Gold and Soul Silver is shockingly vibrant and detailed, with Johto's already distinct cities getting added detail and touch-ups to help them become even stronger. If any visual element doesn't work, it's the redesign of the characters, although it's admittedly minor. Characters are less stocky and lankier, and for some characters it's a side grade or even an upgrade. Claire's over-the-top outfit fits her personality as a bit of an egotist, but Lyra, Chris's replacement, is questionable. The hat is so stupid, it looks so bad. The redesigns are kind of a mixed bag, but really it's kind of a nitpicky preference thing at worst. The music is also super good. It's the same compositions, which were already fantastic, but now they're instrumentated. There are a few songs that have changed more drastically. For example, the intro song has gone from being like this moody, mysterious piece to something that's a bit more exploratory and adventurous, which I'm kind of mixed on. It's still a good piece, but it's different. I think this game is inarguably the best Pokemon has ever looked. There are elements in the next generation that look better, and there are some elements that I don't think look as strong. GSC's nearly perfect soundtrack is beautifully remastered. Also, I didn't really know where else to shove this, but a lot of Pokemon have gender differences now. So for example, male Doduo have black necks, while female Doduo have tan necks. They're really minor, and they don't have any gameplay differences in this generation outside of the ones that already existed for genders. In earlier versions of Generation 4, which we know from Generation 4 assets that have leaked, every Pokemon had gender differences, and that was scaled back a lot. Someone presumably reasonably said that it would be a lot of work to redraw every sprite to have gender differences every generation and come up with more. After this, gender differences are the ones that are already here maintained, but only a handful have been added since. I don't know where to put it. It doesn't have a lot of effect. It's a nice little detail, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, I think that's about all as far as like gameplay and visual changes. The breeding has been sped up. There's a lot of new moves. If you have any more questions about gameplay, just refer back to the Gold, Silver, and Crystal stuff. Everything I didn't touch on here is pretty much covered there, or will be covered soon. So with that, I guess it's time to return to New Bark Town. Each house now has a windmill, presumably a sign that the small town subsists on clean energy, which is a cute detail. And Elm's house now has a staircase exclusively for Silver to look through. The biggest change this early on is a new rival, kinda. Whichever character the player doesn't select, Ethan or Lyra will become an NPC, who serves to do the catching tutorial later, as well as a brief daycare tutorial near Goldenrod. They're never battled and largely irrelevant, but they're there, I guess. Sometimes they'll call you on your Pokegear and just say bullshit to you. As before, Elm needs an egg delivered, and as such, has a Pokemon to gift the player. Chikorita Grass, who becomes Bayleaf then Meganium, whose mixed attacking stats let it use grass moves on either end of the spectrum, and now with the signature Grass starter ability Overgrow, which it shares with all Grass starters, which boosts the power of Grass moves when below 50% of its maximum health. It's worth noting that the movesets are much better constructed now too. Chikorita's movesets by level up are still kinda bad, but decent moves aren't pushed off until the mid-50s or even 60s, and variety is generally better. Case in point, Cyndaquil, Quilava, and Typhlosion, the fire starter line, who now get Eruption between Flame Wheel as Quilava and Flamethrower as the final move. Their ability Blaze is identical to Overgrow, but with fire moves instead. The water starter line, Totodile, Croconaut, and Feraligatr have almost inarguably seen the biggest growth. Being a physical water type in Gen 2, while still the best of the three, wasn't optimal. With Bite, Ice Fang, and of course Waterfall becoming physical, it's nothing but a titanic benefit to the line, making it far and away the strongest of the Johto starters. Like the other two, its ability Torrent is a pinch boost to water moves. Since all the abilities are the same, I'm just gonna say this in kind of a sweeping way. The boost is good, especially stacked on top of Stab, but it's best not to let things get to that point if possible. They're boosts that are good if you end up in a situation below half health, but you don't want to force yourself to half health to use them. West of New Bark is the first route home to some of the game's simplest Pokemon once again. The Pidgey line, including Pidgeotto and Pidgeot, hasn't changed much. A few new moves exist like Feather Dance, which slows opponents, but the physical special split hasn't changed much for them. And their abilities, Keen Eye, which prevents accuracy lowing, and Tangled Feet, which increases evasion while confused, are both useful, but kind of fall into the category of uncommon to activate. That is, they're a little too situational. Keen Eye is one of the handful of abilities to have an effect outside of battle as well, reducing the encounter rate of Pokemon 5 levels below the user. It's cool that it does something, but I'm hard-pressed to call it useful considering how desperate you'll be for experience since the level curve issues still somewhat exist in this game. Similarly, Rattata and Raticate haven't seen much change, although they get more out of Bite, a dark move as it's physical now. As for abilities, the pair have Runaway, which guarantees escape from battle even when trapped, but only works in wild battles. Against trainers, there's still no switching out from being trapped. Basically, it's kind of a non-ability. Guts, on the other hand, is pretty great. When affected by a non-volatile status condition, Burn, Paralysis, or Poison, their attack is boosted by 50% and also negates the attack reduction from Burn. Unlike Confusion and Accuracy Lower, status is everywhere and extremely manipulable given items that have been introduced that cause these statuses. The Flame Orb and Toxic Orb, which give the holder a Burn or Toxic Poison, obviously. Dealing with constant health drain makes the strategy risky, but it's situationally a very, very good ability. Sentret and Furred are still lesser Rattata and Raticate, and the unimpressive ability selection of Runaway and Keen Eye doesn't help, despite being fitting for Pokemon based on Scouts. Finally, Hoothoot and Noctowl, and the term Lesser Pidgey line comes to mind immediately, although alongside Ki-Eye, the pair have Insomnia, which prevents sleep. It's not like anyone will be running Rest Noctowl, so preventing sleep is moderately helpful if situational. In the north, as before, Route 46 is completely optional, but holds a few new Pokemon. Spearow, which can evolve into Fearow, still the best early route birds, and really appreciating new flying moves like Aerial Ace, but only having Keen Eye as an ability. The Geodude line, including Graveler and Golem, are still too slow to be great, but get Earthquake and new Rock Stab and Stone Edge, more powerful than Earthquake but only 70 accuracy, and still a basic necessity on rock types who don't exactly have a sea of moves to pick from. Of their two abilities, neither is very great in this generation. Rockhead prevents recoil damage from attacks, and seems like easy access to powerful moves, but the pool of moves is incredibly limited, and Geodude's line only learns one, the non-stab Double Edge, which is decent, but compared to Stab, Earthquake, and Stone Edge, nah. Sturdy, on the other hand, is one of the all-time greats starting in Generation 5. In Generation 5, Sturdy allows surviving any hit from full health, which is kind of bordering on broken. It basically guarantees a free switch-in, lets Pinch Berries activate for boosts, which are berries that activate and give a boost at low health, and is so good that a lot of Pokemon give up their item slots to hold Focus Sashes for an identical effect. In Generations 3 and 4, the only ability that Sturdy has is to block one-hit KO moves. There are no NPCs in the game that use these as far as I'm aware, and outside of some very rare gimmick sets, nobody is going to competitively use one-hit KO moves. They work on variable accuracy, the higher the user's level compared to the target, the better, with a base of 30. An ability slot to avoid 4 mediocre moves nobody uses is not a very wise investment. Cherrygrove hasn't changed much. The houses are modernized to look like houses while retaining the cherry-colored roofs. It looks comfy, but as before, it's more or less a pass-through. The guide around town is now non-optional, so missing the Pokegear map is impossible, but in exchange the player gets the running shoes, so while I'd almost be annoyed, it's a worthwhile trade. The running shoes on top of allowing faster movement also increase encounter rate while running, so there's an option to go slower for less encounters or faster if looking for something, which is a nice bit of control over the game. Similarly, on Route 30, the Apricorn case is now non-optional. The player is forced to take it one way or the other, which idiot-proofs things, but apricots really aren't necessary save getting special balls occasionally. Route 30 is a bit different in each game. Gold gets the Caterpie and Spinarak lines, while Silver gets the Weedle and Ledyba lines, although Caterpie and Weedle are eventually available in either. Caterpie and Metapod haven't changed much. Caterpie can get Stab and Bug Bite at level 15, 5 levels beyond when it would be fully evolved, and the line's abilities change as they evolved. Caterpie has Shield Dust, which prevents additional effects from moves, that is to say it can't be burned by Fire Punch or flinched by Bite, and so on. It's a good ability, but Caterpie is so frail and weak that it'll never matter. Metapod also has a decent ability in Shed Skin, which gives it a 1 in 3 chance at the end of every turn to cure itself of status, Burn, Poison, Paralysis, Sleep, or Freeze, which can help it break out of sleep faster and avoid taking excessive damage, but it's still so scant in moves and power that it's borderline useless. Likewise, Butterfree has a useful ability in Compound Eyes, doubly useful actually. The accuracy of any move used by Butterfree is multiplied by 1.3 times, giving it an almost perfectly accurate sleep powder as well as boosting a few moves. Additionally, it increases the chances of a wild Pokemon holding an item, so farming Metal Coats off of Magnemites or King's Rocket from Poliwhirl is much easier to do, especially because held items have gone from being 2% on Pokemon to being variable between like 5 and 50%. Butterfree is still extremely bad. It's weak and frail, but it does have moderate usefulness in catching and item hunting. Weedle and Kakuna share abilities with their counterparts, Shield Dust and Shed Skin respectively. Beedrills benefit a lot, mainly because Poison and Bug types both have usable moves now. Poison Jab, which is basically Super Poison Sting, a bunch of dark moves, Toxic Spikes, and even some strong physical bug stuff. X-Scissor hits hard, and U-Turn hits hard and lets the user switch out after it lands. Swarm is a disappointing ability. It's a clone of the starter abilities, boost up bug moves at low health, but I promise Beedrill will either be at full health or 0, and it will never get to use Swarm. It's very frail and weak, barely worth using, but quite a bit better than it used to be. Ledyba and Ledyen are, not better. Their move list is a touch better, but they're frail early route bugs still. They have Swarm, again they'll never be able to survive to use it, and Early Bird, which halves the duration of sleep, rounded up. Ledyba's line will never survive using Arrest, and I guess maybe it could be nice going against something with Hypnosis, but they're still really bad. Spinarak and Ariados have the same improvements that Beedrill does. Good poison and bug moves now exist, but they still are what they are. Their abilities are designed to mirror the Ledyba lines, Swarm, still too frail to use, and Insomnia, which prevents sleep. Okay ability, makes them a bit more annoying to catch, still pretty well unusable. Along Route 31 is Bellsprout, and Grass type is a type that has really seen some growth, pardon the pun, not to mention the existence of Solid Poison Stab and Sludge Bomb. The Sun Weather condition has seen a lot of improvement, and almost entirely because of new abilities for Grass types to increase synergy. And the entire Bellsprout line, Weeping Bell and Victory Bell included, have all gotten Chlorophyll, which doubles speed and Sun. This is a fairly common ability for Grass types, so this improvement affects a lot of them. But alongside one-turn Solar Beams, it's a huge benefit. In Sun, Victory Bell's OK 70 speed jumps to 140, tying it with Electrode and only leaving it outsped by 3 forms of the event legendary Deoxys and Ninjask. It's extremely fast and can be super good in teams built around Sun, especially because in this generation, Sunset by the ability Drought, which is only held by one Pokemon, does not go away, it lasts until the battle ends. Dark Cave is still just off of 31, containing Zubat, which evolves into Golbat, and then Crobat. Better Poison and Flying Stab help, still fast, and still have Hypnosis. Their ability Inner Focus prevents flinching. Crobat is already fast enough that it already borders on immune to flinches, and it's extremely situational even then. Crobat is a good choice, but not spectacular. Dunsparce is also in Dark Cave. Swarms have changed. They're now unlocked after the Elite Four, but can still be used to boost it from 1% to 41%. But it's also available through Rock Smash, which can be obtained before the gym. Getting Dunsparce is still kinda shitty, but Dunsparce has a cool new ability that makes it fun if gimmicky, and no, Runaway isn't that ability, that's still useless. It's the other ability, Serene Grace, which doubles the chance of moves activating their secondary effects. For example, Ancient Power goes from a 10% boost to all stats to a 20% chance to boost all stats. Thunder has a 60% chance to paralyze, Shadow Ball has a 40% chance to lower special defense. It allows a lot of room for shenanigans and funny sets, especially given how wide Dunsparce's coverage is, although statistically it leaves a lot to be desired. Violet City has gotten a fantastic makeover, cobblestone roads, purple Japanese style houses to match the touched up Sprout Tower, which now has a dark wood look, and even a darker paint job for the Pokemon Center to match the rest of the town, and goddamn, the music sounds crisp. Before the gym, the player can trade a Bellsprout for an Onix. Steelix is interesting too, as it's the first trade evolution Pokemon to be available for capture, appearing in much later areas like Mount Silver, which would sort of open up the floodgates for more. First Steelix in Diamond and Pearl, then here, Politoed in Gen 5, and on and on. Like the Geodude line, Onix and Steelix benefit a lot from Rock getting new useful moves. As for abilities, they're the same as Geodude's, Rockhead and Sturdy. Onix only gets Double Edge, which isn't that great for it, and Sturdy is still bad in this generation. Unfortunately, while Steelix is still pretty great, it has the same mediocre abilities and no additional recoil moves. Sprout Tower has Gastly, and Gastly and its line, Haunter and Gengar, are still great. More access to dark moves, including the powerful special dark move, Dark Pulse, and Sucker Punch, which hits with priority if the opponent attacks, plus Levitate, which makes the line ungrounded, giving them some of the benefits of the flying type. Immunity to ground type moves, which eliminates one of their huge weaknesses, as well as spikes with the slight downside of making them incapable of removing toxic spikes. Not to mention the fact that ghost type moves like Shadow Ball can now be special, which definitely doesn't hurt. Levitate is a really great ability, it comes up a lot. There's a lot of Pokemon with Levitate, a lot of Pokemon appreciate Levitate, it's just a good ass ability. Falkner is a great showcase for how opponents' teams have been improved. Many of them are way better thought out and more challenging, usually in a good way. Because of Keen Eye, Pidgey and Pidgeotto can't be cheesed with accuracy lowering, but Pidgeotto also has Roost, which recovers 50% of its HP at the cost of grounding it for one turn. It's a lot for a first gym, even with Onix and Geodude being available, but I appreciate the effort to keep things interesting, which is shown off way better with later sets. Following the gym, the player can get 4 eggs, 1 mandatory and 3 through a semi-defunct web integration. I don't know, dog. The mandatory egg is of course Togepi, which still evolves into Togetic, and has a new evolution introduced in Generation 4, Togekiss, which is normal flying like Togetic. Although this can't be obtained until the post-game as it evolves via Shiny Stone, which requires a post-game HM to get in the overworld, or can be obtained through the bug catching contest, or another method we'll get to in a bit. With the physical special split for moves, their coverage is much wider on special moves to use, and they get Serene Grace for the same shenanigans Dunsparce can pull, plus Roost on top of Ancient Power Cheese, which I used. It's very funny when it goes off. Their other ability is questionable, especially on a bulky special attacker. Hustle increases the power of physical moves by 50% at the cost of lowering their accuracy by 20%. Hustle really isn't a good ability on physical attackers, unless you love missing, let alone on something whose attack is still lower than its special attack when increased by 50%. Outside of battle, Hustle also gives a 50% chance for Pokemon to be at the top of their level range. That is to say, Pokemon that are available from level 10 to 12 are more likely to be level 12. It's helpful-ish for grinding, but the level differences are usually in such a small range that it's kind of like, who cares? After getting Togepi, the player meets the first Kimono Girl, who have an expanded role much later. On top of this, the player can get 3 eggs from Primo using codes that were formerly generated from the Trainer Club website, but now have to be obtained via a third-party site recreating these codes. 2 of these only give Pokemon that are obtained on the next route anyway, but the third is otherwise exclusive to the postgame in Kanto. Egg 1 is Mareep, which evolves into Flaffy then Ampharos, also decent choices for electric types, although it's a type that hasn't changed a lot outside of Thunder Punch being physical now, and Rocking Static, a contact ability that has a 30% chance of paralyzing an opponent that uses an attack that makes contact. Most physical moves make contact, most special moves don't, although there are some exceptions. It's an ability that's annoying to go against, but can come in clutch on a lucky free paralysis at times, and unlike Fire Red and Leaf Green, contact abilities aren't nearly as ubiquitous or common in Johto, so they're not a huge pain to get around. Static also has a field effect that raises the encounter rate of electric Pokemon, which helps when looking for the 5% Pikachu in Viridian Forest, I guess, or farming metal coats. That's a situational ability, there are not that many electric types. Egg 2 is Wooper, who evolves into Quagsire and appreciates having physical water moves to use. Damp prevents the opponent from using Explosion Self-Destruct with the ability Aftermath, which is one of those extremely situational abilities that doesn't end up coming into play often. On the other hand, Water Absorb is great. When hit with a water move, including an ally's Surf in double battles, hint hint, a Pokemon with Water Absorb is healed for the damage that would have been dealt. It's a total immunity to water moves, healing if it can switch into or bait one out, and free healing in doubles. It's a very good ability. Quagsire can make a real mess of things in doubles, which is a shame because double battles just don't happen in-game that often. The final egg is Slugma, who is otherwise only available in Kanto and evolves into Magcargo. The line is still slow and frail, but they get Ancient Power as a special rock move, and still do fire moves relatively well. I even used a Slugma throughout the game to pretty good success. Its first ability, Magma Armor, prevents freeze. Nobody is going to try to use ice moves against Slugma, so that's pretty irrelevant. And Flame Body is a fire-type version of Static, having a chance to burn on contact, which is pretty solid, but more interestingly, both of these abilities share a field effect, which means any Slugma or Magcargo gets the great additional benefit of being an incubator. Having a Pokemon with either of these abilities halves the amount of steps needed to hatch eggs, which speeds up breeding immensely and makes the Slugma line a staple in breeding. Route 36 is blocked off, so Route 32 to the south is the only way forward, holding a few new things to find. Exclusively in Soul Silver is Ekans, which evolves into Arbok, although Ekans is available in Heart Gold via the replacement for the Game Corner, as well as through another method that will be discussed later. Physical poison moves are good for it, Shed Skin is still good, and Intimidate is great. One of the all-time great abilities, really. When a Pokemon with Intimidate is set out, they automatically lower the attack of the opponent by one stage, basically a free growl, which is enough to shut down a lot of physical attackers, or at least heavily slow them down. On top of sharing Keen Eye's field effects of reducing encounters. It's a fucking amazing ability. It makes Arbok fairly useful, although it pales in comparison to some of the later Intimidate users. Anything that has Intimidate on it, no matter how bad it is with a couple exceptions, is pretty much guaranteed to be at least goodish. Not gonna lie, the Hoppip line, composed of Hoppip, Skiploom, and Jumpluff, is still pretty bad. That said, Chlorophyll is fantastic, and at base 110 speed, which makes them an effective 220 in Sun, it outspeeds everything in the game naturally, which could give it some niche use in dedicated Sun teams, but it's still very fucking frail. The line's other ability, Leaf Guard, prevents status in Sun, which would be good protection on a better Pokemon, but the Hoppip line is just too frail for it to matter at all. The Old Rod is still obtained here, which gives access to some Pokemon through fishing too. Tentacool and Tentacruel still exist as very okay water types who have slightly better poison moves to use and a pretty alright ability in Clear Body which prevents stat reduction at all, meaning no annoying shit with Intimidate, Growl, whatever. It's a very solid ability to have in general, even if Tentacruel really doesn't give a shit about getting Growled or Intimidate, which are the most common forms of stat reduction. Liquid Ooze is a bit too situational as many abilities are. If a Pokemon uses a health draining move like Absorb, Mega Drain, etc. against Tentacruel, they take damage instead of healing. They're not incredibly common moves, so this ability isn't frequently useful. Magikarp is still bad, that's kind of the point, although it does have Swift Swim, which is a great ability. It's Chlorophyll but for rain, which doubles speed, and is great on a Pokemon that can actually do something unlike Magikarp. Meanwhile, Gyarados is basically god tier now, I mean. In Generation 2, being a physical water type meant Gyarados was extremely good at using Hyper Beam and doing nothing else. Waterfall and Ice Fang make it into a fucking monster, let alone Dragon Dance, which boosts speed and attack by 1.5 times on the first use, and fucking Intimidate, which doesn't hurt in the slightest. Still, one of the best abilities in the game on a Pokemon with incredible attack that finally has physical attacks to use. Basically, if you're not using Feraligatr, you should probably be using Gyarados. The Old Rod, of course, also opens up some backtracking, with Poliwag available in Violet City and evolving into Poliwhirl and either Poliwrath or Politoed. The whole line has the same abilities as the Wooper line, Water Absorb and Damp. Water Absorb isn't as great on them since they already resist water, although it is still a pretty incredible move. Politoed is a good special water attacker, but the whole line is kind of slow right now, and there's something that they get in the next generation that really kind of turns them around. Dark Cave has Goldeen, which becomes Sea King. I caught a shiny Goldeen in Soul Silver. 2 shinies for this whole marathon, not counting the Gyaradoses. I got 5 red Gyaradoses, I got a shiny Goldeen and a shiny Hoothoot. Goldeen and Sea King aren't great, physical water types competing with Feraligatr and fucking Gyarados? Nah, but they use Waterfall well enough, and I mean, Swift Swim is a fucking great ability. 68 base speed becomes a fantastic 136, but that requires a pretty dedicated rain team, and I still don't know if even then they'd be better than Gyarados. Water Veil, their other ability, prevents burns, but nobody is going to attack a Goldeen or Sea King with fire moves. In Cherrygrove, the player can get Krabby, which evolves into Kingler. They're also physical water types, they're good, but Gyarados Gyarados. Its ability Hyper Cutter is like Clear Body but kinda worse. Its ability Hyper Cutter is like Clear Body but worse in that it only prevents attack reduction, which granted, this is something that Kingler really wants to keep, and it's a good ability despite being a worse version of Clear Body. Its other ability, Shell Armor, prevents critical hits. It's generally a nice ability to have, and it's really broken on Pokemon that can effectively boost defense and recover HP, but on Kingler, it's a nice bonus, but it's not going to be an ass saver like Hyper Cutter may turn out to be. From Route 32, the player can reach the optional Runes of Elf, which has undergone a few changes. The puzzles that have previously opened the way to the lower levels are now touchscreen based. The entire layout of the place has been resorted. Instead of a few caves spread around, it's actual runes, and even the insides are darker and moodier, and it all comes together well. Rocks in the area can be smashed with Rock Smash to obtain fossils, although they can't be revived until Kanto, the Helix Fossil in Heart Gold, Dome Fossil in Soul Silver, and the Old Amber in both. Early on, only unknown A through J are available, but the rest are available later as in Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Upon obtaining all 26, plus doing the puzzles that were introduced in Crystal, which can't be done until Ho is obtained at the earliest, so right before the post-game in Heart Gold and pretty deep into it in Soul Silver, there are also 2 new unknown forms introduced in Generation 3 for some reason, an exclamation point and a question mark. I'm not really sure why these were introduced. They don't have any relevance in Generation 3 where they were introduced, but there are now 28 unknown. Unknown still only have access to Hidden Power. They are still not good, but they do get ground immunity of Levitate, so yay. It's also worth noting that instead of being determined by IVs, their form is now decided by a hidden value. So their shininess, the form they have, and their hidden power are all independent from each other. Finally, before the next gym is Union Cave, a small dungeon that has Sandshrew and Heart Gold, which evolves into Sandslash. Like Ekans, this Pokemon is available in the Game Corner replacement and even later in Soul Silver. While still held back by low speed, its good attack and stab Earthquake make it usable on top of Sandveil, one of the most broken abilities in the game, which causes the accuracy of any move used against a Pokemon with Sandveil in a Sandstorm to have its accuracy reduced by 20%. So not only is the opponent likely taking damage from Sandstorm, they're probably going to start missing a lot, and taking damage from Sandslash's attacks at the same time. And keep in mind, while Sandstorm from the move only lasts 5 turns, Sandstorm from an ability that we'll get to later continues for the whole battle, so anything with Sandveil becomes a fucking monster on a sand team. And unlike the Pokemon with Drought and Drizzle, whose abilities summon Sun and Rain, the Pokemon with the Sandstorm ability comes pretty reasonable time in the game. Azalea has been given a bit of a woodier theme, with the buildings having thatch roofs presumably crafted from wood farmed from the nearby Elix Forest. The nearby Slowpoke well actually looks like a well too, and down there the player meets Team Rocket, whose admins actually have names this time. Don't get me wrong, Proton's name is fucking terrible, he's fucking hideous really, but at least it's a design this time. The well, true to its name, also has Slowpoke in it, which can become either Slowbro or Slowking. Their speed is true to their names terrible, but they are decent special attackers, especially given, the Psychic is still a pretty good type. The 3 all share abilities. Oblivious prevents infatuation caused by the move Attract, situational, but considering how frequently the 3rd gym uses it, it's useful to that end. And Own Tempo, which prevents confusion. Again, moderately situational, but confusion isn't tossed around that infrequently. While Violet's gym had a great visual touch-up, floating in the sky with some invisible paths, Azalea Town's gym has been given an actual puzzle, carts that travel along strings that can be turned on and off with switches. It's a neat but simple puzzle based around pathfinding and even has a mandatory double battle, which is neat. Bugsy's team is the same, his Metapod and Cocoon are just as non-threatening before, but that Scyther, oh man. You may have to do some light grinding for this thing, fast as fuck, packing U-turn to switch out, quick attack for priority, and of course using the ability Technician, an insane ability that multiplies the power of attacks that are 60 base power or below by 1.5 times, making quick attack effectively stab, 45 base power. U-turn is a bit too strong at 70 base power to qualify for Technician, but it's 105 base power on the 2nd gym after stab. He's tough, and I kinda love it. After the gym, the player fights the rival for the 2nd time, using the starter strong against the players. I skimmed over the first fight because honestly it's just a tackle off, but it's interesting to note that his team is actually slightly higher leveled here, but arguably weaker. His Gastly has traded Hypnosis for Mean Look and Spite, which can lock the player in and cause them to lose PP, but defeating Gastly lets them escape, while Hypnosis is much easier to come back from. Elix Forest looks so good. I love how during the day light shines through the trees. It's such a cool little detail, and they've made the shrine bright red to stand out a little better. The Farfetch chase has been redone to actually be a puzzle, with Farfetch turning towards the player when they step on sticks and the player needing to sneak up on it from behind, which is more engaging than just following it around. Oddish can be found here and evolves into Gloom, then either Vileplume or Blossom. They're still not nearly as good as Victory Bell, even with Chlorophyll. They go from base 50 speed to base 100, definitely tolerable, but also definitely not as good as Victory Bells. Paras and Parasect are still really bad. Really bad. But they have Spore. They're not entirely alone this time, but the other evolution family that has Spore isn't available until the post-game, and even then they come in so late that grinding one up for use is a bit questionable. Like Paras itself, its other abilities are questionable. Effect Spore is funny, it's a contact ability like Status, but it causes either paralysis, sleep, or poison at random with a 10% chance of each. Parasect is kinda too frail to be running a contact ability, and it actually kinda makes it unreliable as a Spore tool, as it can inadvertently poison a Pokemon or something like that while trying to Spore them. But it's not any worse or weirder than Dry Skin, which is kind of a weird variant on Water Absorb, that has HP recovery from water moves, although it's always 1/4 of max HP regardless of the attack's power, with an additional 1/8 recovered during rain, at the cost of losing 1/8 HP a turn from Sun and taking an extra 25% damage, on top of Parasect's already 4 times damage from fire moves. It can be pulled off to funny results, but it's risky at the very least, and Parasect isn't nearly a good enough Pokemon to pull it off. Headbutt is also once again available in the forest, which allows the player to bump trees to find Pokemon, which are dispersed statically instead of at random this time, and some trees in certain areas have unique encounters, but all of those are locked in the post-game. In Elix itself, Pineco is available, which evolves into Forretress, whose typing is fantastic. Forretress is arguably even a little bit better with the additional hazards it can set, like Stealth Rock, which does 12.5% of maximum health on switch-in, but with Rock-type weakness applied, so Pokemon like Butterfree with a double Rock weakness start the battle at 50 HP. Their ability is Sturdy, which doesn't do a lot in this game. Backtracking a bit, Headbutt gives access to a few more Pokemon. In Azalea Town, Aipom is available and has a new evolution, Ambipom, which it evolves into by knowing Double Hit, a mediocre multi-hit move that it learns at level 32, making it one of only a handful of 4th generation evolutions before the Elite Four. Ambipom is fast and has great attack, a limited role to be the strong, pure normal type attacker, but one it pulls off solidly with its ability. Aipom has Runaway and Pickup, and Pickup is a fantastic tool that basically makes Aipom pay off on its own. After every battle, a Pokemon with Pickup, or multiple if there are multiple in the party, have a 10% chance of finding an item, and what item they find improves based on their level, including but not limited to nuggets which sell for a lot, rare candies which increase Pokemon's level by 1, evolution items like Sunstone, Moonstone, and King's Rock, TMs including Earthquake, and Leftovers, an item that slowly heals a Pokemon over time. Ambipom, on the other hand, loses Runaway on evolution, while still having Pickup as an option for Technician. Double Hit goes from 2 mediocre 35 power hits to just above 50 each before Stab, 75-ish each after Stab, as well as plenty of other moves that it can use like Fake Out, and anything below 60 base power gets a boost. Fantastic ability, one of the best abilities. Ambipom is fun and a really cool choice, especially because Ambipom is actually available. Heracross is also available, and yeah, he's still a lot of work to get good, but he still hits hard as fuck, and Bug and Fighting both have a ton of new moves that are actually useful. Swarm is an okay ability, I suppose. Unlike Beedrill, Heracross has a lot better survivability, although it's still an ability you don't want to see often, and Boosted Megahorn is tempting, but Guts is the real winner on Heracross, much easier to set up, and boosting its fighting moves, not just its bug ones. Lastly, Execute and its evolution Executor. Their moveset is still so bad, I tried really hard to use one, but the moveset is so limited. Chlorophyll, great ability, it boosts them from 55 to 110 speed, which is good, but the lack of moveset and the competition for Grass Chlorophyll users is so high that it's kinda hard to fully get behind the whole Executor thing. After clearing Elix Forest and meeting another Kimono girl, the player exits onto Route 34 where the daycare is available. Breeding is mostly the same, so I won't cover it in any more detail, but a few Pokemon are available here. The Abra line, Kadabra, Alakazam, are still great psychic types. They do special attacking really well. Synchronize causes the line to pass on its status condition. Paralyze and Abra get paralyzed yourself. A really cool counter to status spam, although it can make them tough to catch. Additionally, it forces a 50% chance that an encountered Pokemon will have the same nature as the Pokemon with Synchronize if it's in the lead, which makes going for specific natures far easier than the regular 1 in 25 chance. Inner Focus isn't incredibly useful. Like the Zubat line, Alakazam is just a little bit too fast to see flinches regularly, although it is weak to Dark-type moves, which are the most common to give out flinch, so, you know, it has a little more potential than on that line. Drowsy and its Evo Hypno are, you know, lesser Abras still. Insomnia's a decent ability. Meanwhile, Forewarn announces the name of the opponent's strongest move. This is at best moderately useful info, but more likely kind of just not helpful. Ditto's gimmick is unchanged, Transform is still too slow, it can breed with anything, so that's great regardless, and its ability is Limber, which prevents paralysis. This more or less doesn't matter at all, since it gains the opponent's ability on transforming. Goldenrod's makeover is great. It really took the Golden and ran with it. Golden brick walkways, tall buildings with yellow roofs, cute little redesigns for the flower shop and radio tower, which now looks like a giant satellite. It's great. It all looks great. The global terminal is in Goldenrod 2 off to the west. It was formerly the place to go for all the Wi-Fi features, and now it's kinda useless without third-party servers. In the department store, which now has snazzy escalators, a Drowsy can be traded for a Machop. Machop's line, Machoke and Machamp, still solid fighting types with great attack, held back a bit by being slow, but with two great abilities, Guts, which makes their massive attack even better, and No Guard, the Machop line's signature ability, which makes the accuracy of all moves used by and against bypass accuracy checks to always hit, no matter what. High risk, high reward. It even allows the Pokemon to be hit during the in-between turns with moves like Fly and Dig, letting Machamp use normally risky moves like Stone Edge like they're nothing. No Guard's out of battle effect doubles the encounter rates. This is probably useful for grinding, but man, does it seem annoying. I don't know. They're both really fun abilities. It's a really hard hitter, definitely worth considering. The game corner has been replaced due to European laws that regulate like gambling in children's media or something. I don't fucking know. And what replaced it is the best Pokemon minigame ever, Voltorb Flip. I fucking love Voltorb Flip. I played way too much fucking Voltorb Flip. It's a bit like Minesweeper. Along the bottom and right side of the board on the 5x5 grid are numbers. The top number indicates how many points are in a row or column, while the bottom indicates how many Voltorb are in a row or column. Click on a Voltorb and instantly lose, so there's this risk-reward and math dynamic. Anything without a Voltorb has a number 1 to 3, which multiplies the reward, and the number indicating the point total can also be used to suss out where cards are. If every card but Voltorb are flipped, coins are paid out and the level advances. Higher levels have harder patterns but greater rewards. It's just a fantastic minigame and way less tedious than grinding slots. As before, some Pokemon are available as prizes. Voltorb Flip lets Heart Gold get Ekans and Soul Silver get Sandshrew alongside Dratini. Dratini and its evolutions, Dragonair and Dragonite, benefit greatly from Dragon finally having good moves, especially good physical moves that pair well with Dragon Dance, but despite their great stats, they're still not that fantastic. Dratini and Dragonair have Shed Skin and the survivability to make good use of it unlike Metapod and Kakuna, while Dragonite has Inner Focus, which is a pretty ability. Goldenrod's gym hasn't changed much, the part that forms the Clefairy is raised, but it's still just a battle a bunch of trainers gym. Whitney the Noob Trap isn't any easier either. Her Clefairy has Cute Charm as an ability, a contact ability that causes attraction, while her Miltank still has the Flinch and Attract stats on top of the ability Scrappy, which lets her hit Ghost type, so no cheesing with Gastly. And on top of all that, her Miltank also holds a Lumberry which cures any status condition. Paralyzing or putting the thing to sleep requires doing it twice. It's mean, she's a pretty big wall, perhaps too big of a wall. It definitely does not help the level curve issue to make teams this good, but I do appreciate the competence. After beating Whitney, Route 35 is the next stop, containing both Nidoran female and male like before. Nidoran F's eggs can hatch into Nidoran males, so the whole line of Nidoran form up to a total of 6. Nidoran F, Nidorino, Nidoqueen, Nidoran M, Nidorino, Nidoking. Nidoqueen is defensive but still hits hard and has great coverage, while Nidoking just hits hard and also has great coverage. A better selection of poison attacks don't hurt, nor does the wider selection of TMs for them to play with. All 6 share abilities, Poison Point, which is a contact ability that causes poison. It's annoying to go against, but it's a nice boost when it goes off against an opponent. And Rivalry, an ability that causes a 25% boost in attacks when used against Pokemon of the same gender, but lowers them by 25% against Pokemon of the opposite gender. The mixed nature of the ability and the difficulty of planning around it make it kind of questionable. I mean, half the time you're going to be better, half the time you're going to be worse. Yanma is also available on 35, but on first pass only at 1%, which can be boosted to 40% through Swarm in the postgame. Yanma has a new evolution, Yanmega. Like its pre-evolution, it's bug flying and evolves via knowing Ancient Power, which it learns at 33, meaning it can evolve before the Elite Four if it's hunted down at its minuscule catch rates. Yanmega is a bit odd. It's a very strong special attacker, and it does have some options, Ancient Power, Air Slash, Bug Buzz, but outside of Ancient Power, it gets most of these extremely late. Yanma has good abilities, like Butterfree it has Compound Eyes, giving it an accuracy boost and helping find held items. Meanwhile, its other ability, Speed Boost, is, broken. At the end of each turn, Yanma gains a +1 to speed, that is to say, it uses Protect once and it's at 1.5 speed, and can just stall up and become incredibly difficult to deal with basically by doing nothing, which is pretty fucking crazy. Yanmega shares Speed Boost, which is even better on it obviously, but trades Compound Eyes for Tinted Lens, which doubles the power of not very effective moves. A 2x resist becomes neutral, and a 4x resist becomes 50% damage. It's a solid ability that makes Yanmega able to pump out damage consistently, but I mean, it's certainly not worth using over Speed Boost in any build that can facilitate that. They're both kind of mediocre still, especially because of that typing. Further north is the optional national park, where bug catching contests are still held on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, mostly unchanged. To catch a Pokemon, it's graded on how close to the max level it is, and a rarity factor, as well as remaining HP, so not hurting them is optimal. The winner gets a Sunstone, or in the post-game, any evolutionary stone available at random. Outside of the contest, Sunkern is available and evolves into Sunflora. They're still bad. Chlorophyll boosts their pitiful 30 speed to a blistering 60, tying it with Bayleaf. Solar Power is a little more interesting, boosting special attack by 1.5 times in the sun, at the cost of 1/8 HP per turn. Those are some wicked powerful solar beams, but I'm not sure Sunflora can afford the sun damage given how slow and frail it is. The bug catching contest offers a good slew of Pokemon to get as well. Caterpie and Weedle's lines in the game's opposite where they were previously available, and a few new ones. Venonat and its evolution are still mediocre, although Compound Eyes and Tinted Lens are both decent on Venonat. Well, Venomoth swaps Compound Eyes for Shield Dust, and Venomoth is just not good enough at surviving to use Shield Dust very well. Scyther can be an absolute monster, and that's before it evolves into the even stronger Scizor, whose solid typing and new abilities, plus solid new bug and steel stabs, make it unstoppable. Both have Swarm and Technician. Swarm is still pretty Technician is insane, as I touched on during Bugsy. This is a 50% boost on any attack 60 base power and lower. 90 base power priority bullet punch after stab, 60 base power false swipe to help with catching, 90 base power aerial ace. Scizor and even Scyther are fucking monsters, and if you need something to use false swipe or even just tear through things, it's fucking incredible. Pinsir has improved a bit. It has bug-type moves to use now, so that's something. Its attack is still good, but Scizor exists. Hyper Cutter is good for Pinsir, and its other ability, Mold Breaker, is a bit tough to explain. It ignores abilities that prevent moves, so Pinsir could use Earthquake on something with Levitate. The list of abilities affected by it is pretty small, but it's occasionally useful against things that are common, like Levitate's very common, so Pinsir Earthquake with Mold Breaker is good at breaking up levitate things, but it's basically a good ability in any situation where it can go off, but it's a little bit too situational to rely on. The National Park also connects to a new area, the Pokeathlon Dome, which hosts a series of touchscreen-based mini-games. They're actually fairly fun for what they are, fast-paced, short, although they don't really emulate well. They're pretty tough to play on a mouse, I would know, because I had to get footage for this video. These mini-games do have a purpose outside of being fairly fun, though, in that the Athlete Shop sells evolution stones, the old ones before the post-game, Fire, Thunder, Water, and Leaf, plus other evolution items like Metal Coat and King's Rock, while the new ones become available in the post-game, things like Dawn and Dusk Stone. It does take 5 to 6 full Pokeathlons to get each stone, so it does become a bit tedious, but it's no worse than farming phone calls, which is nearly impossible in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and actually allows access to Pokemon that have stone-based or item-based evolutions before the post-game. Route 36 is the next non-optional route, hosting unique Pokemon for each game as well as a few others. In Soul Silver, Vulpix and therefore Ninetales are exclusive, and they're still solid fire types, and have the fun ability Flash Fire, which not only gives them an immunity to fire moves, but if they're hit by one, boosts the power of their fire moves by 50%, which is a solid boost if they can catch a fire move on a switch in by baiting it out, have a grass type in against a fire type, switch into get your boost. In doubles, moves like Eruption can trigger it too, although it's not quite as good as Water Absorb. In Heart Gold, instead of Vulpix, Growlithe and by extension Arcanine are available instead. They're okay, Physical Fire has a few more options, and they're pretty good at using it as far as things go. Plus, alongside Flash Fire instant ability like Vulpix has, it also has Intimidate, which is obviously a fucking fantastic ability. Stantler still exists. It's a mediocre normal physical attacker. It gets Intimidates, but even an ability that great can't save it. While its other ability is Frisk, which notifies the user of opponent's held items. It's useful for finding held items, especially in conjunction with Compound Eyes, but is otherwise pretty useless. Stantler is worth catching just to have Frisk, because there aren't many Pokemon that have it. You lead with a Compound Eyes Pokemon, switch to Stantler, see if you got the item. If you do, thief it. If you don't, yeah. But that's all it's good for. It's not a good Pokemon to use. Finally, Sudowoodo, who can be awakened with the Squirt Bottle obtained in Goldenrod, is okay. Sturdy's still a non-ability in this game, but at least for Rockhead, Sudowoodo has a wider range than Onix, with double-edged takedown and the Grass-type Woodhammer, which is solid coverage, and funny because it's pretending to be a tree. Sudowoodo also has a new evolutionary relative, a baby available through breeding, while holding the Rock Incense, which isn't available until beating all 18 gyms, including Kanto. Bonsly, which has the same abilities, same pure Rock type, evolves into Sudowoodo by knowing Mimic, and is a baby Pokemon, so therefore not very useful. After entering Ecrutique's Pokemon Center, the player can backtrack to Goldenrod for an Eevee, which has 7 evolutions, 2 of which are new. Alright, let's do this. Eevee is still pretty weak, but has a good ability. Not Runaway, but its other ability Adaptability, which increases stab from a 1.5 times boost to a 2 times boost. This is an incredible ability in general. Eevee only gets this on normal moves, but that's still 200 base power return at max happiness. Vaporeon is a solid water type. Water Absorb is also a great ability if it can go off. Jolteon is a solid and incredibly fast electric type special attacker, and Volt Absorb is water absorb for electric moves. Solid, but electric moves aren't quite as common as water are. Flareon, I mean, physical fire moves exist now, but like, what's it gonna do? Fire Fang is okay, but not that okay. Flash Fire is a good ability. Espeon is still great and Synchronize is funny, although in later generations it gets an even funnier ability. Umbreon is still a defensive monster and really hard to kill. Dark is still a really fun type and it has lots of great moves, as well as Synchronize, which, like with Espeon, is a very funny move to use. Alright, now for the new ones, neither of which is available at all, not even in the post-game. Leafeon is a grass type and evolves from Eevee when leveled up near a Moss Rock, something that Heart Gold and Soul Silver lack for some ungodly reason. Even if they wanted to lock this new evolution to the post-game, Viridian Forest easily could have housed it, but yes, Leafeon is transfer only. It specializes in physical stats, defense and attack, but that's not amazing on grass types who've kind of started to lean a lot more towards special. It's okay enough, but there are so many useful grass types that it makes it kind of hard to fall in line with Leafeon's thing. Leaf Guard is okay, status protection is nice, but Leafeon also is not crazy useful. It's better than Flareon, they all are. Spoiler. Its counterpart, Glaceon, which is an ice type, evolves via level up near an ice rock, which doesn't exist, and again, the Seafoam Islands exist, so why is it transfer only? Glaceon is great special attack, and I mean, ice is kind of a terrible attack, but Glaceon is one of the less terrible ones, especially because of its ability Snow Cloak, which works like Sand Veil, reducing the accuracy of incoming attacks by 20% in hail, which is a way lesser weather condition compared to sand, but still a very good ability. It's good for an ice type, but that means it's still not that great. So the cut is probably use Espeon or Umbreon, and also having the transfer in Leafeon and Glaceon is fucking stupid. Anyway, back to Critique. The music, fantastic. The Japanese style house is fantastic. The path to the bell tower where Ho-Oh resides, being covered in blaze red and yellow trees, fantastic. The already distinct and lively towns of Gold, Silver, and Crystal have been fully brought to life and are just fucking gorgeous. Critique is one of the areas of biggest change in the game. Instead of fighting the kimono girls to get surfed, a lone rocket is fought to defend a kimono girl, but we'll come back to that soon enough. Additionally, Burn Tower is no longer optional. Mori the gym leader and Yucine, surviving from Crystal, are found there, and as such the rival fight is unskippable. His team is nearly identical to Gold, Silver, and Crystal, but it's nothing all that tough. The gym isn't available until the legendary beasts are met in the basement, but Burn Tower also has some Pokemon of its own. Coughing, which evolves into Wheezing, is okay. It's very defensive and okay at that, and doesn't do much else. Both have Levitate, so their ground weakness is an immunity, only leaving the Psychic type, but they're still kinda... they don't really do anything unless you want to stall and spam Toxic. Magmar is also available, alongside its pre-evolution through breeding Magby, and a new evolution, Magmortar, which it evolves into by trade while holding the Magmarizer, which isn't available until getting all 16 badges on Cinnabar Island. Magmar is already pretty decent, and Magmortar is also a decent fire type, great special attack, and decent elsewhere. It works well as a good fire type attacker, besides it being locked to the late post game. All three of the Magmar line have Flame Body, solid ability, but Magmar doesn't exactly love taking hits. Finally, Raikou and Entei are both technically available here. Suicune, like Crystal, will come later and isn't a roamer while the other two are. The roaming mechanics suck way less. The roamers don't actively flee from you while being hunted and always ignore repels, so there isn't a need to have an extremely fast Pokemon at exactly level 40. It's way less stressful and I appreciate it so fucking much. Being able to go at them with higher level Pokemon helps a lot, as they can now run while asleep, which is a hilarious visual and can be useful, but it can also be kinda irritating. Raikou is still good, fast, high special attack, electric type. Bite not being special anymore hurts it a bit in the coverage department, but it's still really great at shitting out electric moves. Raikou as well as Entei kinda have the generic legendary ability, as I like to think of it. It's basically whenever they can't think of something more interesting for a legendary, they throw pressure on it. Pressure makes PP drain twice as fast, using a move costs 2 PP essentially. And like, it's technically a good ability, but in game and in competitive, battles move so fast that nothing is going to run out of PP because of pressure. In a stall game maybe, but on something that shits damage like Raikou, it's a cool lore thing. Fighting something so powerful causes so much pressure that the opponent panics and moves suboptimally. But it's just not that useful on most Pokemon that get it, since they're all like legendaries that just destroy everything in one hit anyway. Like Hustle, it also has a field ability, which is to force Pokemon to be at the higher end of their level range, which can be helpful. It's a few extra levels, it's not a game changer. Entei is still Super Flareon. Again, Fire Fang isn't that good, and Pressure does not do a lot for Entei, who is still, you know, I mean, it's better than Flareon, and it's the worst of legendary beasts. And all that brings us to Morty, Ecrutique's Ghost-type gym leader. His new scarf is a pretty cool design element, with its tattered look matching his typing well. And Ecrutique's gym has a better puzzle. Instead of a zigzagging invisible floor, each opponent carries a candle that lights a path, and when defeated the lights go out, forcing the player to memorize the route. It still suffers from having only Gastly, Haunter, and Gengar in it, but it's a nice new gimmick. Morty still uses the entire Gengar line, still no Mischievous unfortunately. He spams Hypnosis and Curse with the addition of Sucker Punch thrown in to make it even worse, and Levitate protecting the Gengar line from super effective ground moves. This one, I mean, technically it's good design, in that it's a well thought out team. It makes an already tough gym kinda even tougher. Beating him obviously gives access to Surf, which means more backtracking. Route 35's water has both Psyduck and Golduck available for capture. Still a solid, very even statistically water type who stands out as a counter for weather with their signature ability Cloud 9, which negates the effects of but does not end weather. So, for example, on the field, Sandstorm doesn't deal damage, Sun doesn't boost the power of fire moves or make Solar Beam skip its charge turn, and so on. It's a counter that doesn't come up a lot in games since there's very few trainers that actually use weather, but it is legitimately useful outside of that, especially for weather set with a move instead of an ability as it runs down the timer. Their other ability is Damp, which is a good description of how useful it is on them. Surf also allows access to Union Cave where Lapras is. Lapras is still decently bulky, probably hurt more by its ice type than any benefit it gets, but passable. Water Absorb is obviously still great. Shell Armor alongside Lapras's bulk and recovery could possibly make it pretty survivable, but ice gives it some really shitty weaknesses. The lower floors of Union Cave also connect to the Runes of Elf, which allows the player to get a few more unknown, as well as a few more interesting things. Natu and Xatu still aren't amazing, but are usable, and special flying moves are a nice bonus. Synchronize is funny, Early Bird is a bit useless on the relatively frail Natu and Xatu, who don't exactly have time to rest, but it could be worse. Smeargle is still fantastic, given effort is put in to make it a good moveset. Even better, really. There are way more varied options for moves, more entry hazards to set, and Technician has an ability for massive 90 base power stab false swipes, or, you know, I mean, it learns every move in the game. Every move below 60 base power is open to Technician. Smeargle is a very, very good tool, given a ton of work to get it ready, and it also has Own Tempo as an ability, which is, you know, situational. Route 38 is the next actual area to go to, a short route with a surprising amount of Pokemon tucked into it, starting with Meowth exclusively in Soul Silver, which evolves into Persian. Meowth has pickup in Technician, I shouldn't need to explain why, but both these already make Meowth good. Persian drops pickup for the much less impressive Limber, which is better here than on Ditto, but if you plan on using Persian, Technician is the play. Persian still isn't that great, but the ability is just so good that it makes it pretty usable. Magnemite is still one of my favorite Pokemon. It evolves into Magneton, then into a new evolution, Magnezone. Still Electric Steel, which it evolves to when leveled up in a magnetic field. And you know what Johto does not have? Like Ice Rock and Moss Rock, there's no magnetic fields, despite Kanto having a whole route dedicated to a power plant, so Magnezone is nonsensically transfer only. Epic. Magnezone may be slow, but its defenses and special attack are great. If it was available, it could be an awesome choice for an electric type. Magneton is passable, but not nearly on Magnezone's level. Sturdy is a non-ability, while Magnet Pull is okay on paper. It prevents Steel-type opponents from switching out or fleeing, and trapping is always good. But Magnezone can't really do anything to a Steel-type unless it happens to be Skarmory. It also increases the encounter rate of Steel-types, but considering how few there are, this exists basically just to make Skarmory easier to find, and help with Metal Coat grinding, even though you'd probably still rather lead with Compound Eyes. Farfetch'd is still extremely mediocre. Keen-Eye and Inner Focus are both very situational. It gets False Swipe, but so does Scizor. Yeah. Tauros still hits hard and is still pretty fast. It's perfectly usable, especially because Intimidate is broken. Its other ability, Anger Point, is silly. It maximizes attack, pushing it up to 4 times for free if Tauros is hit with a critical hit. Centering your player on a 1 in 16 chance of crit and pretending Tauros would survive a crit is extremely risky and inconsistent, even if it can be activated by critting a substitute. Snubbull is available as a 1% here, higher with Swarms in the postgame, and evolves into Grand Bull as before. For the effort of finding one, it really is just a less usable, far slower Tauros, even having Intimidates, a great ability but better on Tauros. Snubbull's secondary ability is Runaway, which is pretty much useless, but Grand Bull has Quick Feed, which is fun to mess with. It's a speed version of Guts, which boosts speed by 50% when inflicted with status. This only pushes Grand Bull up to a still pretty bad 67 though, at the cost of slowly draining health or other obnoxious effects. Quick Feed also reduces all encounters by 50%, which can be useful for moving through caves that would otherwise be obnoxious. The conclusion is that on this route you should probably just use Tauros. Finally, there's Miltank, and Miltank is still a bulky monster who hits fairly hard and has some really cool abilities. Thick Fat reduces damage from fire and ice moves, effectively giving it 2 extra resistances to fairly common and powerful types, while Scrappy lets Miltank hit ghosts with normal and fighting moves, making it more multi-purpose. Either is good and can really help with just letting it go hard with powerful normal type moves, and making it perhaps even more generally useful than Tauros, who's already pretty solid. Route 39 doesn't have anything new for Pokemon, but the farm has been redesigned to actually look like a farm, which is pretty cute, and Bao Bao is met here as well, the Safari Zone Warden, who informs you that the Johto Safari Zone is opening soon and will induce massive suffering, but we still have some time before that. Olivine looks lovely now, like a real port city. Its road have spiral brick patterns, the lighthouse isn't just a really tall house anymore, flags mark the entrance to Johto from the boat taking people in from Kanto, and it's just a comfy place to be. As before, the lighthouse Pokemon Ampharos is sick, and Jasmine has been at the top, asking the player to find medicine for him. The lighthouse dungeon is redesigned to be less straightforward, but it's still just a battle a bunch of trainer dungeon. A man in town also trades a Voltorb for a Krabby. Voltorb's Evolution Electrode is still one of the fastest Pokemon in the game, but doesn't capitalize on it excessively well, outside of being really good at exploding on things. Static is okay, but Electrode isn't that bulky, while Soundproof makes it immune to sound-based moves, a very small subtype that has almost no good moves to block, at least in this generation, save perhaps Roar and Sing, and as such is just too situational to consider. The good route is also obtained in Olivine, which means backtracking. But first, Staryu is available in Olivine's waters, although far easier to get on Route 34, and evolves into Starmie, and they're still great special attackers worth using as a water type for a team, especially given that the moveset changes have given it faster access to good stab psychic moves. Its first ability, Illuminate, has no effect in battle, but doubles encounter rate of leading the party, which is obnoxious most of the time, while Natural Cure is pretty good on Starmie, especially given it has Recover for healing. When switched out of battle, Natural Cure removes any status conditions, making status a worse minor inconvenience and greatly improving their usefulness in the game when traversing routes where status can become a problem on long walks. Corsola is still pretty mediocre, Hustle doesn't suit it at all, it barely suits physical attackers, let alone a special one, and Natural Cure is a great ability, but Starmie is just going to be generally more useful in this situation. Route 32 has Quillfish, although getting it with the good route alone is tedious. Super Rod and especially the post-game Swarm make it far easier to catch, and I mean, more poison types are a nice boost, but as a physical water type, it's fairly outclassed by the Big Blue Dragon and the Big Blue Gator. Poison Point is okay, Quillfish is actually bulky enough to pull that off to an extent, and Swift Swim could give it a potential niche on rain teams. 170 speed in rain is pretty fucking massive, but I don't really know what it would do in that rain that, say, Dragon Dance Gyarados wouldn't do more solidly. If building a rain team, it's potentially a fun choice, but it's definitely not something to plan a team around. Off the coast of New Barktown, Shelder is available and can be evolved into Cloyster. Still defensive monsters, new moves really let them capitalize it, on top of 2 abilities they love. Shell Armor, which bolsters their already great defenses, and their signature ability Skill Link, which makes all multi-hit moves hit the maximum number of times. Icicle Spear, which is stab by the way, hits for 125 base power before stab, 187 after, plus Pin Missile and Rock Blast for coverage, regardless of its attack stat not being great. Skill Link is so powerful that it lets Cloyster absolutely shred opponents, and it's a very fun ability to use. Chinchou is also available, and Hidden Lantern's typing is still fun. Volt Absorb is a good ability if it can be baited, and Illuminate is useless at best and annoying at worst. They're a fun option, the typing is funny. That said, they are far from the best available. I mean, Starmie. Route 40 and 41 are still sea routes, and the Whirl Islands are still inaccessible until after getting Whirlpool. Therefore, the only new things to see on these routes are Mantine, exclusive to Heart Gold. The type and special defensiveness are still solid, but it still doesn't do all that much. Swift Swim gives an impressive 140 speed, which is pretty crazy, but there are other better Swift Swimmers, and Water Absorb is another immunity, which is always great, but not something Mantine was particularly hurting for. Obviously, a very good ability in doubles. Mantine also has a new pre-evolution, Mantike, which is also water flying, unavailable until the post-game because breeding it requires the Wave Incense, which requires the final HM, and with the goofy evolution method of leveling up with Remoraid in the party, which is extremely cute, but Mantike obviously isn't really useful in any way as it's a baby Pokemon. Cyanwood looks nice, the clotheslines are a nice detail to show how simple their island life is, and the blue roofs of the house are pretty and match the sea around them. On Cyanwood, the player gets a free Shuckle, which is technically available through Rock Smash earlier, but at a rate that's tedious, and I kind of forgot it was possible until I hit this point. Shuckle is still basically a joke Pokemon, godly defensive stats, awful everywhere else, including HP, but it has a few gimmicks that let it be silly. Power Trick swaps its attack and defense stats, making it an absolute monster when saying roll out with 230 base attack. It's a gimmick set for sure, but it's a very fun gimmick set, especially in Trick Room, which makes slower Pokemon go first, although that's a lot of setup. Sturdy is a non-ability, and Gluttony makes berries that would normally be eaten when Shuckle hits 25% health, like the Citrus Berry, which heals the holder to an extent. It makes it eat them at 50% instead, which is good in theory, especially with stat-boosting berries, but Shuckle is just so frail that it doesn't really work for it. Cyanwood still has the optional battle with Yucine, who uses the same annoying tricks, 2 Pokemon with Hypnosis, but his Pokemon are slightly higher level here. It's good free experience, but it's also just an option. There's also an entrance to Cliff Edge Gate, which leads to the Safari Zone, which isn't open yet, thank god. Chuck's gym is redesigned. Instead of a mediocre strength puzzle, it requires pressing a switch in the back, which requires fighting a few of the trainers in the gym while others can be dodged. It's not that interesting, but it's not exactly worse than the original was, and the big waterfall pouring on Chuck to train is a cool visual, especially given that he uses Poliwrath. Both of his Pokemon use Focus Punch, which requires them to not get hit to go off, but it hits pretty hard when they can make that happen. To that end, his Primeape spams Double Team, which I'd prefer it didn't, while his Poliwrath spams Hypnosis, which I'd prefer it didn't. He's not that bad, having a decent Bird or even Psychic type is pretty easy at this point, and he only has 2 Pokemon, but I prefer gyms that don't rely on obnoxious strategies like this. Beating Chuck gives the player Fly, where they can fly back to Olivine, Key Ampharos, and then go and find the Warden calls. The Safari Zone is now open and the suffering begins. Now to be fair, the Safari Zone allows access to Pokemon who otherwise came way too late into Kanto to ever see use in the original games. But on the other hand, the Safari mechanics suck. No battling or weakening Pokemon, encounter a Pokemon and get 3 options. Throw Mud to raise its catch rate, but increase the chance it will flee, almost always a bad idea as it will cause it to flee even faster than it already does, which is usually every 2 or 3 turns. Throw Bait to lower its chance of fleeing, but also its catch rate, also a bad idea as it will eventually flee anyway. And Chucking Balls and Praying, which is what a majority of the Safari Zone devolves into. And there's some questionable Pokemon choices in the Safari Zone that are absolutely miserable to catch. Before that, there are a few routes leading into the Safari Zone though. Road 47, which has a really cool cliffside look that's unique for the otherwise flat Johto, has Seal, moderately earlier than Gold and Silver, which required getting Whirlpool from the 7th gym to access the Whirl Islands. While still just okay water types, Seal and its evolution Dugong have fun abilities. Thick Fat is again solid, making Dugong's Fire Neutrality into Resist and Ice into a frankly silly 8 times Resist, while Hydration has one really funny property over its Sun counterpart Leaf Guard. Instead of preventing status like Leaf Guard does, it cures it at the end of each turn, making Rest a free full heal with no drawback. Dugong isn't that bulky, but with no downside, in rain, Dugong can be pretty obnoxious with Rest. 2 caves connect to 47, but one is very late post-game, the other Cliff Cave is necessary to move on, and is a simple 3-floor cave with tiny rooms connected by ladders. This tiny cave is one of 3 places where Steelix is available without trade for those interested in using it, as well as Mischievous, who is formerly locked to Mount Silver, the very end of the post-game in Gold and Silver. It also comes with a new evolution, Mismagius, who like Mischievous is a pure ghost, and both have Levitate, which is a free resist. Mischievous evolves via Dust Stone, locked behind all 16 gyms, Pokeathlon, or the bug catching contest, so at the earliest the beginning of the post-game. Unlike Mischievous, who's seemingly planned around Pain Split gimmicks, Mismagius is just a solid fast special attacker and defender, but pretty bad everywhere else. Less gimmicky and useful for solid coverage and great Shadow Balls, but certainly nothing crazy. Route 48 leading into the Safari Zone also has a few early Pokemon. Diglett is normally found in Kanto, only in Diglett's Cave, and evolves into Dugtrio. The 2 were already wicked fast and hit hard, but have also been given completely broken abilities: Sandville, Heightened Evasion, Sandstorm, which is broken enough to be banned in competitive, and Arena Trap, which also happens to be banned. All grounded Pokemon are automatically trapped. Anything that isn't flying or with the ability Levitate cannot switch out or flee, and they're trapped into taking Dugtrio's gigantic and fast earthquakes. Unlike Magnet Pull, which is pretty situational, Arena Trap can easily create scenarios where Dugtrio just sucks up a free kill with effectively no chance of escape. It also doubles encounter rate if led in the party slot, which is not why this ability is so good, believe it or not, but can be useful in conjunction when hunting roamers and the like. Giraffe Rig is also available moderately early, normally coming right before the 7th gym. It's still very mediocre, and Inner Focus and Early Bird don't do a lot for it. Now to actually talk about the Safari Zone. The first thing to note, the Safari Zone isn't a fixed setup. It has 12 blocks which can be laid out 6 at a time that all have their own Pokemon. On the first visit these are random, but will always include the peak area where the Warden wants the player to find Geodude. 3 in-game hours after this first event, there's a second challenge where the player needs to reorganize the layout to find a Sandshrew, giving them access to every area. There's also a post-game change later that gives them access to even more shit, but we'll just cover the default Pokemon first because the endgame stuff is complicated, bad, awful, terrible, confusing, and weird. So let's just do this. The peak area, which is guaranteed to be in the default layout, has Wobbuffet, normally unavailable until shortly after the 8th gym, who's gone from a fun gimmicky Pokemon with the possibility of a free kill into an unstoppable monster with Shadow Tag. Arena Trap, but only other Pokemon with Arena Trap are immune to it. It traps everything, and they need to deal with the 50-50 of Counter and Mirror Coat on Wobbuffet, not to mention Destiny Bond, nearly guaranteeing 2 free kills off of Wobbuffet when paired with the Focus Sash, a held item that leaves the user with 1 HP if they would be knocked out from full health. Wobbuffet also has a pre-evolution introduced in the 3rd generation, Why Not, also pure Psychic, was locked into the post-game by its incense recording the final HM, and evolves back into Wobbuffet at level 15. Why Not also has Shadow Tag, and basically plays identically to Wobbuffet. When Wobbuffet was banned in competitive, people just started using Why Not instead until it too was banned. Wobbuffet, despite being incapable of attacking, is extremely fucking good. Both Cubone and Marowak are available in the desert area, much earlier than Kanto's Rock Tunnel. Both are still pretty hard hitters, but neither is as good a pure ground as Dugtrio. Rockhead makes Double Edge free, but Marowak has Stab Earthquake. Lightning Rod is a really fun ability though, causing all electric attacks to always hit the Pokemon with Lightning Rod. As Marowak is ground type, it's immune to damage from them, and can redirect them from allies in doubles. That said, it doesn't do a whole lot in singles. Marowak is already immune to electric moves, and double battles are extremely rare in game. In Gold and Silver, Clefairy is only available in Mount Moon and Kanto, but can be found in the meadow area of the Safari Zone. It can be bred into Cleffa and evolves into Clefable. We'll love having special coverage of more types, and all share 2 abilities. Cute Charm, a contact ability that spreads Infatuation, which can make the already bulky Clefable more stally, and increases the chance of encountering wild Pokemon of the opposite gender, while their signature ability, Magic Guard, prevents indirect damage, Sandstorm, Hail, Burn, Poison, Curse, the health drain from Life Orb, but with the power boost intact, and on, which make these already bulky things even more of a nuisance. Great defensive Pokemon with a lot of options and special attacking, and very fun to mess around with, especially because unlike a lot of Pokemon, they can be pretty easily slotted onto Sand and Hail teams for people who want to build that way, for a little bit of extra coverage. Likewise, Jigglypuff is available in the meadow, giving access to Igglybuff and Wigglytuff too. They're still kinda just worse versions of Clefairy's line. Cute Charm is still okay, but it's all they have. Marill is also in the meadow, Azumarill is still its evolution, and Azurill is a pre-evolution introduced in Gen 3, pure normal instead of water. The incense for breeding Azurill is in Kanto, so it's inaccessible, and evolves into Marill via High Friendship. Azumarill has a weird tool that changes it from a mediocre defensive water type into a passable but not Gyarados level physical attacker. Their signature ability, Huge Power, doubles their attack stat, taking it from a bad 50 to a pretty solid 100, making them quite a bit more tolerable, while Thick Fat just makes already existent ice and fire resistances a bit better, which is decent for something so defensive but wholly unnecessary given it already resisted both. In the forest, Mr. Mime is available, who also has a new baby pre-evolution, Mime Jr. The incense for it is in Kanto, and it evolves into Mr. Mime by knowing Mimic, and it's also pure Psychic. Mr. Mime still exists just to set up Light Screen Reflect and doesn't do much else, but it's not awful at that, just not all that useful either. Soundproof is funny because mimes, but overly situational, although their signature ability Filter is pretty decent, reducing super effective damage by 25%, giving the mimes a bit more survivability. The swamp area has Murkrow, a dark type, available before Kano. That's fucking insane. Murkrow also has a new evolution, Honchkrow, locked behind the postgame by the Dusk Stone like Mismagius. Honchkrow is a solid but frail physical attacker who works well, as unlike in Gen 2, there are plenty of great physical dark moves to use. Pursuit, which does extra damage on an opponent switching out, Night Slash, which has an increased crit rate, which stacks well with one of their abilities, Super Luck, which increases their crit rate naturally, which makes them a lot more usable. Their other ability is Insomnia, which is fine. I loved using Honchkrow, and I'm glad I did, despite Murkrow's fairly low catch rate, making it kinda miserable to get. The marshland has Grimer, which evolves into Muck, and better poison moves help, as with all poison types. That said, they've been made pretty gimmicky. Sentret reduces the encounter rate of wild Pokemon and does nothing else, not incredibly useful, and Sticky Hold prevents items from being rendered unusable via Knockoff, Bug Bite, Thief, or whatever else. Knockoff is pretty competitive, although it wouldn't get as competitive until it got buffed in a later generation, but all of these are kinda rare in-game, and the Grimer line is still incredibly slow. Sticky Hold also increases the chance to get a bite while fishing, which is cute but very rarely applicable, because fishing is just not that common a thing to do. The mountain area also has Lickitung, who has a new evolution as well, Lickilicky, which it evolves into by knowing Rollout, which it learns at level 33, making it a part of the small group of new evolutions available before Kanto. Both are pure normal type. Lickilicky is still slow and defensive, it's not that great and doesn't have many uses, while Own Tempo and Oblivious are both pretty situational. Larvitar being available in the mountain area is great. Before it was only available at low level in Mount Silver, actually using its later evolutions, Pupitar and Tyranitar was borderline impossible, which is a shame because they're fantastic, especially as Tyranitar can now use its Dark typing for wickedly powerful crunches and bites. Hell, catching it in the Safari Zone is enough runway to get it before the Elite Four. Each member of the line has its own ability. Guts makes Larvitar great as far as baby Pokemon are concerned, as it boosts its already decent attack, and getting status is very easy. Pupitar has Shed Skin to cure status, and Tyranitar has Sandstream. Sandstream summons an endless sandstorm when sent out. Unlike Sandstorm summoned by a move, it does not go away after 5 turns, it stays for the entire battle. Tyranitar pops out and instantly starts wearing opponents down, gets boosted special defense because of its rock typing, and makes building a sand team with insane abilities like Sandville a cakewalk. A good and varied sand team couldn't be easier to make by getting a Tyranitar here. It's honestly kind of broken, especially because it has massive stab stone edges and crunches, and great non-stab earthquakes. Use a Tyranitar, there's obviously a little bit of risk to it if not making a full sand team in that it'll chip away at your other teammates, but it's still very fucking good. Doduo is available here, and Dodrio is basically a super Fearow. Good normal flying type, fast, physical attacker, fun to use but fairly plain, and Runaway and Early Bird are kind of nothing abilities. The Wasteland area has Kangaskhan, it's still fine, pretty plain normal physical Pokemon. Scrappy is extremely nice, and Early Bird is pretty good on it since it's bulky enough to use it. We're almost done, I swear. Rhyhorn is available, its evolution Rhydon now has its own evolution, Rhyperior, which it evolves into via trade while holding a Protector, which is in Mount Mortar, but requires all 16 badges. Rhyperior, which is also Rock Ground, has great attack and defense, but is mediocre elsewhere, and even comes packing a signature move in the horribly named Rock Wrecker, which is a physical rock-type variant of Hyper Beam. Rhyhorn and Rhydon have Lightning Rod, which is hilarious in doubles, and Rockhead for an entire 2 normal moves, Takedown and Double Edge. Rhyperior drops the boring Rockhead for Solid Rock, a clone of Mr. Mime's Filter, which reduces the power of super effective moves by 25%. Good for something with as many weaknesses as Rhyperior. Is Rhyperior worth using? I mean, it can hit pretty hard, but it's slow enough and scared enough of grass and water types that even with Filter, it's kind of hard to run. And I think Rhyperior is one of the worst designs in the game. It's really fucking ugly. I don't understand the samurai armor or the cannon arms, but it's kind of ugly in like an endearing way where I kind of want to hug it, even though it's so like ugly and stupid looking. Oh, it's all over the place, the design. It's That's enough of the fucking Safari Zone for now. We'll have to come back eventually, but for the time being, the Safari Zone mechanics are fucking awful, but it's very nice that Pokemon like Larvitar, Murkrow, Diglett have been made available at a far more reasonable time than they were in Gold, Silver, and Crystal. You know, it really opens up a lot of team building variety and things like that. Anyway, back to Olivine. Jasmine, her gym is still just her, but other characters will pretend to fight you just to thank you for helping Ampharos. It's pretty cute. Jasmine's redesign is kind of weird, her new dress is kind of just worse by being more busy, and her team is basically unchanged, only switching out Sunny Day, which Steelix used to try to stop water types, at the cost of making it more vulnerable to fire for Sandstorm, which is way more reasonable, but any decent fire or ground type still just destroys Jasmine. And basically, until the Elite Four, there just isn't much left. The Safari Zone wipes out so much in one go that things will go very fast until all the new shit in the post-game. Case in point, the only new thing until the next gym is Mankey, which evolves into Primeape, exclusive to Heart Gold on Route 42. The final few letter unknowns are also available because of Strength, which is moved here to make it unmissable, but like, come on. Primeape is fine, it has good attack and speed, and can be moderately useful, but for fighting types, Machamp has No Guard, which is way more fun than Vital Spirit, an Insomnia clone that has the Hustle Overworld ability, forcing higher level Pokemon, and Anchor Point, which isn't useful on something even less survivable than Tauros, who can't really make it work. Very funny if it does go off, but it's not going to happen very much. Mount Mortar has had a redesign in the back, which makes it a bit more complex and adds a ton of paths for the final HM in the end. The Lake of Rage has a great touch, where there's a rain effect, and the hedge maze is flooded while Gyarados is rampaging. When things have calmed after it's caught or defeated, and unfloods allowing access to the hidden power guy. The Mahogany Rocket HQ is largely unchanged, although there is a nice touch with using the Executive's Murkrow to activate a voice-activated lock because it likes to mimic him. The largest change is that the Executives, like Proton, have actually been made into characters. The female executive is now Ariana, who's fought in a double battle with Lance on your side, which is fun, and her team actually has movesets, and by that I mean her Murkrow uses Wing Attack instead of Peck. Like Proton, she kinda looks awful for some reason. She has a massive weird widow's peak, at least in the official art, but she looks okay in the sprite. Patrell, the male executive, is somehow even worse than Proton, with his stupid neon purple hair and beard tuft, and man, these Neo Rockets are so fucking ugly. Price's gym has a good redesign. The original was just a nice sliding puzzle that someone with foreknowledge could skip most of. Here, the gimmick is still ice sliding, but with ice blocks that the player can bump into to move about and that solidify when they crash into each other. So it's not just sliding around to an endpoint, but moving other objects to set that up. Price's team is leveled a bit, but he still feels easier and less interesting than the last few gyms. He tries to use Hail, but not incredibly well, just tossing the move on Seal and Piloswine. Piloswine has Snow Cloak, which is potentially annoying, but everything he has is just so slow and frail that it doesn't really end up mattering. Whirlpool opens up the Whirl Islands, which only has Horsey to catch. The legendaries are held off until after the 8th gym, so going here before the radio tower is fine, not wasting time by not getting Lugia at the same time. Horsey, Seadra, and Kingdra are all solid. They have solid stats across the board, and Kingdra's Water Dragon typing borders unbroken, only weak to Dragon itself. Horsey and Kingdra have Swift Swim, 170 speed and Rain on Kingdra. It's really fucking good as a special Rain Pokemon. Their other ability, Sniper, boosts the power of critical hits. It's an inconsistent strategy, but it makes crits even more likely to be extremely free kills when they do happen. Seadra drops Swift Swim temporarily instead having Poison Point. Ordinarily okay, but Swift Swim is so broken that Poison Point is an awful alternative. The radio tower is also opened. To get in, the player needs a rocket outfit, but we don't get to see it in battle, which would have been cute. All the executives return, along with the final executive now being Archer. He actually looks fine unlike the rest, and his Houndoom is still terrifying, which is great. The underground puzzle is also less abstract. It's almost too simple compared to the original, which I still don't understand after 3 entire playthroughs and as an adult, but you know, I'd take this new puzzle over the other one any day. Route 44 has Tangle, another Pokemon that can reach its Gen 4 evolution, Tangrowth, Pure Grass, and also available through Knowing Ancient Power, which it gets to level 33, only a few levels above where it's captured. Tangrowth has good attack and special attack, enough to be played either way, and solid physical defense, but it's pretty abysmal everywhere else. Ancient Power is a nice crutch, and Chlorophyll pushes its awful 50 speed to a tolerable 100. Leaf Guard is an okay option too, but not so much that it beats out Chlorophyll. Tangrowth is bulky, so blocking status is nice, but covering bad speed is way more necessary. Remoraid is also available at a low rate through Good Rod. The Swarm helps but isn't technically necessary. Both Remoraid and its evolution Octillery are good enough special attackers. Their attack is equally high, but they don't exactly have the moveset for it, which makes it bizarre that Remoraid has Hustle and ability Octillery drops for Suction Cups, which prevents it from being forced to switch out by moves like Roar and Whirlwind. It also boosts the chance a Pokemon will bite when fishing, which is cute if a bit useless. The two share Sniper, which is cute because one's a Revolver Fish and one's a tank, but it's still a very luck-based ability. Ice Path thankfully retains its redesign from Crystal. It's a very pretty blue, icy cave. Waterfall has become unmissable, which feels a bit handholdy. I prefer a hands-off approach. People who don't explore in a game that's mostly about exploring should be punished a little bit. Ice Path tosses a bunch of ice types out as before, to try to put a band-aid on Claire being a pretty big level wall and Dragon being tough to deal with. Jinx, its pre-evolution Smoochum doesn't matter much, is still a really solid fast special attacker, although their abilities are massively boring. Oblivious is all but irrelevant by this point in the game, and Forewarned was never a relevant ability. Swinub and its evolution Piloswine are the final Pokemon to have their new Generation 4 evolution available early, Mamoswine, which it evolves into with Ancient Power, but unlike other evolutions by move, Piloswine won't learn it by level up, but it's in its moveset. It requires using the move relearner to teach it, which also requires the rare item, the Heart Scale. It's a really odd requirement, making Mamoswine kind of abstract to get, and implies that Mamoswine just wasn't around much in the wild. All of these Gen 4 evolutions try really hard to explain why they weren't possible to get in earlier generations. The new babies require incense, and the new evolutions require stones, items, or moves that weren't around. It's weird that they try so hard to stick to canon despite GSC opening with Magnemite randomly gaining a type, something Gen 6 would also do. Mamoswine is pretty decent. Ice Crown like its predecessors, attack is fantastic, speed is tolerable, which is rare from the ice type, great stab earthquakes, and woolly mammoths are just cool as fuck. It's all around very decent, pretty stally, especially as a hail Pokemon, which isn't saying much because hail isn't that great, but Snowcloak boosts its evasion, and it also has Oblivious, which is pretty eh. Finally, Delibird, only in Soul Silver. He's still bad, still a cute design. Delibird's stats are bad, and Hustle is not a benefit to something that has almost no physical attacking presence. Well, Vital Spirit is not helping this frail bird not die. Blackthorn is one of the less interesting redesigns. It still feels like a quaint mountain town, but the design of the houses doesn't exactly feel right. The Dragon's Den is a bit better, the shrine inside looks really great, and Claire's Gym has had a great redesign. The old strength puzzle was just a less interesting version of the one that was done at the end of Ice Path, while the new one, focused on rotating moving platforms to squeeze them through gaps, is pretty fun. Feels good to efficiently move these big clunky beasts around. Claire's also dropped one of her 3 Dragonair for a Gyarados. I know she's Lance's cousin, but this is not a dragon. Lance and Claire are both terrible Dragon Masters. Anyway, pack an electric type, her Gyarados is a monster, Intimidate when used against you is very mean, and comes before the also great Dragonairs whose shed skin make them hard to status, and that's all before the extremely difficult Kingdra, which thankfully doesn't use rain. She's an even bigger wall than previously, extremely scary, and will probably require some grinding. After defeating Claire, Elm calls, he gives the player the Master Ball and asks them to meet with the Kimonos, but before that, let's do some really quick cleanup. With Waterfall, the Karate Master can be fought in Mount Mortar for a free Tyrogue, maintaining its gimmick of evolving into Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, and Hitmontop. Tyrogue still isn't usable, being a baby, and while it can't use them well, Guts is a great ability, and Steadfast boosts the speed of a Pokemon after it flinches, which is exceptionally situational, as Tyrogue already resists the Dark typing, which is where most flinches come from. If it does go off, it's a nice boost, but each of the evolutions has also been specialized a bit. Hitmonlee is still good and has Blaze Kick for some fire coverage. Limber prevents paralysis, which is fine, but Reckless is great. A signature ability that boosts the power of moves with recoil or crash damage by 20%. High Jump Kick is pushed up to 150 base power, Takedown gets a boost too, but deals more recoil as a result. It's a fun risk-reward mechanic to run risky moves for a higher payout. Hitmonchan is already made way better with the elemental punches being physical, giving it great coverage without using its awful special attack. Kenai is okay, accuracy lowering sucks, but its other ability is the gem, Iron Fist, also a signature ability that gives a 20% boost to all punching moves, of which Hitmonchan is obviously drowning in. Fire Punch, Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, Bullet Punch, which is a steel type with priority. Drain Punch, which is fighting stab that drains health for healing. There's a lot of great build potential just from Hitmonchan's punching lineup. Hitmontop, formerly the least interesting in the trio, is not only doing a bit better because of access to useful moves, but its abilities are Intimidate and fucking Technician, both of which are fucking fantastic. Either ability is bordering on broken, and both of which make Hitmontop great on their own, and I shouldn't really need to go into why. South of Blackthorn is Route 35, a route stacked with Pokemon, mostly version exclusives. Heart Gold has Gligar, which has a new evolution this generation, Glysaur, with the still borderline broken ground flying type, which it evolves into via level up with Razorfang at night. The Razorfang itself is only available through the shot in the Battle Frontier, which I'll come back to soon, but it costs 48 battle points, which takes about 42 battles, 2 sets of 21, and that's assuming you don't lose. Battles 7 and 14 are worth 3 battle points, Battle 21 is worth 20. And these aren't normal battles, they're supposed to be competitive prep. These are all full EV and IV Pokemon that require specially crafted teams to fight, which leads me to, why? Gligar was introduced in Johto, why does the Johto remake make it so ridiculously hard to evolve? And if that's not all bad enough, this evolution consumes the Razorfang, which is a great item that lets any move by the user have a chance of causing flinch. 48 BP, hours of work, gone in seconds, when there were plenty of places they could have shoved a free one into the game for the evolution. Anyway, Glysaur's great, incredible defense, good attack and speed, decent elsewhere, wild coverage with Poison Jab and all the elemental fangs, Earthquake, and a bunch of dark moves including Knockoff, U-Turn. It's really fun to use, and its typing is just icing on the cake. Hypercutter is good, and Sandville is way more broken on a sand team, and getting this on a team with Tyranitar is going to leave it bordering on unkillable. Soul Silver gets Teddiursa, which evolves in Ursaring, still solid physical attackers, and their abilities allow for some fun. Teddiursa has the fantastic pickup and quick feet, while Ursaring swaps pickup for the also great Guts. Getting status on Ursaring, say through holding a Flame Orb, bumps Ursaring up to an okay 80 speed or an honestly incredible 195 attack, which just makes Ursaring into a monster, and anything trying to status it with either ability is an idiot. Soul Silver also gets Skarmory, still a great type, way more useful now, very capable of surviving to set up all the new entry hazards like Stealth Rock, and then whirlwinding the whole team into them. Skarmory is extremely difficult to deal with, especially because of Roost. Skarmory barely cares about Kenai because it rarely attacks, and Sturdy is borderline useless this generation, but it's still a good Pokemon despite that. Finally, Heart Gold's answer to the Teddiursa line, Phanpy and Donphan. They're still not great, they don't get many ground moves, Earthquake exists, but it's a late one, so the incredible attack and defense hardly justify the awful speed, and Sturdy is a non-ability. Donphan getting good 46 levels in isn't exactly a stunning endorsement for it. Back to things that actually move the game forward, the revamped Kimono fight is great. It's the same deal, each has one of Eevee's first 5 evolutions, now at a much higher level and with much better movesets. That Umbreon is a fucking bitch. The biggest twist on it all is that they all need to be fought in a row. No healing between, and losing resets them. It's harder than any of the gyms in the game, including the post-game ones. In the gyms, the player's allowed to leave, come back after healing. Like a lot of things in this game, as with its predecessors, low wild levels and slow progression do make the Kimono fight a bit of a wall. Leveling is just hard and slow. But I really do appreciate the attempt to make it challenging. What I don't appreciate is being forced to fight the Legendary after. A gigantic issue with the series as far as I'm concerned is the push to make Legendaries important. In Gold, Silver, and Crystal, the game nods you to your cover legendary, but actually pursuing it and dealing with the difficulty of catching it is left for the player to do, if and when they feel up to it. Pushing the legendaries makes them feel less special, not to the extent that they become a silly plot contrivance for cookie-cutter villains to control like in every game after Gold, Silver, and Crystal, but enough that it feels less earned. Also, while Bell Tower is a great little dungeon with the ramp puzzles and all for the Heart Gold version, being forced to trek to the bottom of Whirl Islands, a confusing mess that don't technically require Flash but are even more miserable without it. As an option, going to the bottom is a fun challenge, and as something mandatory, it's kind of a huge pace breaker. That said, the cutscenes that introduce the birds are fantastic. Ho-Oh soaring into land on the Bell Tower, while the Kimono summon it, and especially Lugia bursting out of the waterfall, are both fantastic moments. It's just a shame that it feels so forced. As before, both legendaries are available in each game, much appreciated for someone who likes to fill the decks, as it doesn't require cheating or multiple playthroughs as most legendaries can't breed, and none of them into themselves, but more on that later. The battles with the legendaries are also kinda less bad, as only the non-cover legendary, Ho-Oh in Soul Silver and Lugia in Heart Gold will have safeguard, so they're not as miserable to get. And yeah, they're still incredibly good. Lugia is incredibly difficult to take down, still able to make hugely defensive plays with recover, and while it still doesn't use flying moves much outside of Aeroblast, which is now special to play into Lugia's strengths, better moves in general don't hurt Lugia's ability to absolutely shit damage on the average Pokemon. It's a monstrous defensive presence, and given that, the default legendary ability, Pressure, is hypothetically good on it at the same time. Few things last as long as Lugia. Similarly, Ho-Oh is still an offensive monster. Sacred Fire is now a physical move to play into Ho-Oh's strengths, Great and Sun. Brave Bird, a physical flying version of Takedown with recoil and recover for survivability. Ho-Oh is obviously heavily broken by design. Pressure basically couldn't matter less. Nothing is going to last long against Ho-Oh, and the only big complaint to make is that Stealth Rock's absolutely decimated. Free 50% damage on Switch, but in game that's not a very big concern. A new addition to the series in Gen 4 is that Legendaries and other one-off Pokemon like Sudowoodo and Red Gyarados respawn whenever the Elite Four is cleared, meaning there's no chances of a permanent miss on them, even the roamers, which allows for risky plays on them. Very grateful for the change. Once the cover legendary is caught or defeated, the player can surface from Newbark to Kanto, on the path to the Elite Four, which should really be called the Elite 5, but I guess it was one of those situations where they didn't want to reprint their name badges or something. Row 27 has Ponyta, which evolves into Rapidash. Being physical fire types is still questionable. Flame Wheel and Flare Blitz, a fire type version of Takedown, don't save these two, especially because it gets Flare Blitz at level 50-6. Runaway is useless. Flash Fire is funny, but funnier on something usable. Victory Road is pretty radically redesigned. It's not nearly as straightforward, featuring holes to fall through to lower floors, but that's not to say it's excessively different. Silver's final mandatory match is here, completing his still wonderful arc. The team isn't much different, but they have improved moves. Sneasel actually has a nice move, although Icy Wind isn't very good on it, and the starters tend to have better moves. Typhlosion has Lava Plume instead of Ember, which is a massive upgrade. Their abilities aren't that impactful. Kadabra has Synchronize, so it can't be easily status, and Haunter has Levitate, but two of his team members have Inner Focus, which isn't changing much. The Elite Four has gotten a lot of upgrades on the other hand. Will's first Xatu, which was always a super fast hard-hitting wall, has Synchronize as well as U-turn to escape bad situations, and Slowbro has a water move this time, while the second Xatu has Ominous Wind, a ghost-type version of Ancient Power with a small chance for an Omni Boost. Koga already tried to be tricky, using spikes from Fortress, Double Team and Baton Pass, tossing around Toxic, and he does a much better job at it this time. That said, he's still pretty easy. Crobat is a fast bitch, but the rest are a breeze if careful. Instead of spikes, Fortress sets up Toxic Spikes and seems more likely to explode. Muck holds Black Sludge, which slowly heals poison types that hold it, and doing the reverse to anyone else. Muck's Sticky Hold makes it impossible to steal regardless, and yes, it still spams Minimize. Bruno has seen the biggest upgrade, the worst in the original alongside Koga. His Hitmontop has Triple Kick and Technician plus Counter. Hitmonlee has Reckless to boost High Jump Kick plus Blaze Kick for coverage. Hitmonchan has a full suite of punches of all types boosted by Iron Fist. Onix loves to drop Sandstorm, and of course Machamp has No Guard. No more Rock Slide misses or escaping with Fly, just suffering. Bruno is such a great fight now, which is cool for someone who just wasn't. Karen isn't much improved, although she didn't need it a whole bunch. Umbreon is Synchronized, Houndoom will try to boost with Nasty Plot, and Gengar has the nasty fighting special move Focus Blast. It's harder, Umbreon is still a horrible pain, and I'd say grinding is even more unavoidable in this Elite Four than in Gold, Silver, and Crystal, but Karen was already a wall. She's better, but not a huge turnaround like Bruno. As for Lance, his Gyarados has Intimidate and Ice Fang, Charizard has a bit of extra coverage, and his Dragonites are massively bulky and have insane coverage. Like Karen, he went from good to better. The Johto Elite Four, save the awkward level curve, which makes getting prep for them a pain, is still really well constructed. Teams are more interesting and varied despite using the same Pokemon, and attempt to use actual strategy at times to play against. Also, the new version of the Champion theme is the best Pokemon song ever, and will probably remain so forever. The slow build-up and amount of power it exudes is amazing. And that's it. The credit to the video is super cute, I like how they highlight everyone's personality briefly, but we all know that's not really it. Before we go to Kanto, there's still stuff to cover. Hell, before we get back to all the new Pokemon to catch, we got stuff to cover. Upon going to Olivine Harbor, the player will meet with Professor Oak, who upgrades them to the National Dex. From here on out, every generation becomes fair game, Hoenn and Sinnoh Pokemon available in various ways, the Battle Frontier opens, and the Elite Four is open for a rematch. I guess we'll just work our way backwards. First, battling the Elite Four again immediately is almost impossible. Will's Pokemon range in the low 60s, while Lance's reach the mid 75s, integrating Gen 3 and 4 Pokemon for some insane fights. Will uses Bronzong, which resists almost everything being Steel Psychic. His Gardevoir's ability Trace copies abilities, and it has insane Focus Blast and Charge Beam to boost itself. Koga's Muck adds Swagger to its Toxic and Minimize to confuse opponents already struggling to deal with it. His Venomoth has Silver Wind, a Bug-type version of Ancient Power, plus Baton Pass to move those potential boosts around. His Swalot, a Pokemon similarly bulky to Muck, spams Yawn to put things to sleep and holds leftovers to heal, and also has Sticky Hold. They're really mean teams and fun to play against once you catch up to a reasonable level. And if you knock out a legendary, you might be forced to. as I was because I accidentally knocked out Zapdos without saving. Bruno drops Onix for 2 solid new fighting types and has stacked his team with great fighting moves. His No-Guard Machamp uses Dynamic Punch, which normally has 50% accuracy and always induces confusion. Karen drops her weird non-dark type options, Vileplume and Gengar for some wicked newer dark types, Sableye has literally no weaknesses, and her Weavile has priority ice moves, and of course Lance has new dragons. The fearsome Garchomp with Swords Dance and Stab Earthquake, Gyarados running Dragon Dance, Salamence, Gen 3's version of Dragonite, which is far superior, holding a Lumberry to wake up early from rest, and the strongest Dragonite yet. It's so exciting to have great battles like this, especially because they make grinding at a certain point way more reasonable once it's possible to beat them, that is. Meanwhile, the Frontier. The Battle Frontier is exactly the same as Platinum's, a little odd considering Gen 2 and 4 happen simultaneously, as evidenced by Gen 4 starting with a report of a red Gyarados rampaging in the Lake of Rage, and replaces Crystal's Battle Tower. Clearing fights gives battle points, which can be used to buy powerful competitive items like Focus Sash, Razor Fang Claw, Choice Bands, and even powerful TMs. The biggest issue is how competitive the Frontier expects you to be. Trainers here have very competitive Pokemon, although often not that great sets. With near-perfect stats, Pokemon used throughout the story just aren't going to cut it. A new team will need to be made, grinded, and perfectly set up through tedious chain breeding for IVs and natures and abilities, plus tedious EV grinding. And it's just so much to deal with. I'm not telling you to cheat, but I don't believe competitive players with shiny perfect IV and EV legendaries that can't be bred, so take that as you will. There are 5 facilities, each headed by a Frontier Brain, while other opponents are randomized. Each facility has its own gimmick, ranging from fun to awful. The Battle Tower offers straightforward battles, bring in any 3 Pokemon you want, except for cover legendaries like Ho and Lugia, or event Pokemon, and do normal, difficult battles. The Battle Factory is centered on rentals. The player picks 3 of 6 Pokemon chosen at random and goes at it. If the goal is battle points, this is the most reasonable tower, although there is skill and luck in getting a good team, and a guide may be helpful for picking well. Like the player, the Frontier Brain Thornton uses rentals from the same pool as the player. Planning ahead is basically impossible, but Factory serves as a good intro to competitive and team building for those who want to learn. The Battle Arcade is something. It's similar to the Battle Tower with the player walking in and doing battles, but before each battle the player spins a roulette that either causes effects on themselves, the opponent, or the field. It's basically all up to luck. You may end up poisoning your opponent's lead for free, or reducing your lead's health by 20% for free. You could end up with a held item that persists through battles, although the random nature could mean whatever gets rolled is useless. The field effects are even scarier, but also even better. Permanent weather from the start of a battle, including Trick Room where slower Pokemon move first, swapping your whole team with your opponents for a battle, or even skipping battles or gaining free BP. It's too luck-based for me, but it's also a fun gimmick when the rolls go well. Battle Castle's gimmick is fun too. Winning battles in certain ways causes the player to gain CP. Good play rewards more, and these points can be used to rent items, heal between battles, which is automatic in every other tower, increase or decrease opponents' levels, and even skip battles. It's also worth noting that the girl near Dirachi as sprite, Caitlyn, is a character who would go on to be a member of the Elite Four in the next generation of games. Finally, the Battle Hall, which sucks. The player and opponent get 3 Pokemon, but can only use 1 per battle. As the players go, opponents start low in level, but slowly raise up to the Frontier Brain or Argenta. It's honestly too complicated and weird for me to even attempt to give a shit. Also worth noting before finally moving on, in the post-game Silver can be found training in the Dragon's Den on low-level Dratini and Magikarp apparently. Upon meeting him, he teams up with the player for a double battle against Lance and Claire. Silver really sucks and barely helps, so you'll need to be significantly higher leveled than you'll be at the time when this is first available to pass this. But this, alongside meeting him at Mount Moon, are mandatory to unlock his final rematch later, which is basically the same as it was in GSC. A relative cakewalk, but a nice conclusion to his arc with his Golbat having evolved through friendship and all. Kanto time. Kidding, of course. There's more Pokemon to find in Johto through 4 methods. Swarms, now a part of Professor Oak's radio show, occur once a day and feature different Pokemon swarming on one route. While the ones from Gold, Silver, and Crystal were available as rare spawns, new ones also appear here featuring Generation 3 and 4 Pokemon. Hoenn and Sinnoh Sound play on the radio on Wednesday and Thursday respectively. Hoenn Sound attracts Generation 3 Pokemon to a router area, while Sinnoh Sound attracts Generation 4 Pokemon and Metatite for some reason. These songs are interrupted after every fight, making them needlessly annoying, but it could be worse I suppose. The bug catching contest gets upgraded in the post-game. While the Tuesday contest still has the same encounter table, but with higher level Pokemon, the Thursday and Saturday tables are unique, featuring newer Pokemon to catch. Finally, the Safari Zone's final expansion, a nightmare of patience that provides a lot of access to new things at the cost of all of your sanity, but let's try to be orderly and work through some stuff before that. First, Hoenn and Sinnoh Sound through caves. These include in Johto, Slowpoke Well, Union Cave, Mount Mortar, Dark Cave, Whirl Island, Ice Path, Cliff Cave, Tojo Falls, and Victory Road, which share 4 encounters. Lots of new Pokemon to discuss. Hoenn Sound's first Pokemon is Makuhita, which evolves into Hariyama at level 24, both fighting types, and may I say, Makuhita being a sumo wrestling punching bag is a crazy good design. Great HP and attack make them good bets, but it's everything else that helps them stand out. 2 signature moves. Smelling Salt cures an opponent's paralysis, but also doubles its power while doing so, and would be good if the two had any consistent way to spread paralysis, while Arm Thrust is a solid multi-hit fighting stab for them. Fighting was seeing an upswing in Generation 4 and would continue to do so. They're not spectacular, but Thick Fat is there to offer additional resistances, and Guts exists to make Hariyama's massive 120 attack into an effective 180 attack if it can catch a status ailment. Hariyama's fun, but not worth the grind to catch up when compared to the King Machamp. The other Hoenn-Sound Pokemon is Absol, a pure Dark type. Absol has cool lore, with it being able to sense natural disaster, but its attempts to warn people cause them to blame it. A really neat piece of world building for the series, and it's surprisingly usable for a Pokemon that doesn't evolve. Its 130 attack beats out Hariyama, and while everything else is average at best, great physical Dark types can be a counter for the somewhat frequent Psychics running around. Pressure is largely irrelevant for Absol, as it's not going to be stalling, but Super Luck, on top of being a nice tie into its lore, is a nice benefit. More frequent crits, especially when paired with Stab Night Slash, which already has an increased crit rate, can be a great combo for dealing with things Dark was created to counter. Sinnoh summons Chingling, a pre-evolution introduced in Gen 4 for Gen 3's Chimecho, both pure Psychic with Levitate, which it evolves into via Friendship at night. Chimecho is an adorable design that everyone, including myself, often forget exists. I love the colors and Windchime look, but it's just thoroughly mediocre and unimpressive Pokemon and a type swimming with insane Pokemon. Lastly, Bronzor, which evolves into Bronzong at level 33. Their Steel Psychic type hinges on Broken, immune to poison, resisting 8 types, only weak to ground and fire, made even funnier by their abilities. The first Pokemon to have Levitate and an additional ability, their signature ability Heat Proof, which halves damage from fire moves. Meaning each Bronzor or Bronzong is a coin flip, where it only has one weakness, where the other is either entirely negated or dropped to neutral by Heat Proof, while otherwise unimpressive and slow. Their stats play up this crazy defensiveness. They aren't actually that good at doing useful things, but the defensive stuff can be really annoying to opponents. Using one in-game actually is questionable, but there's funny memes with it on Showdown. Now for some more Hoenn and Sinnoh sounds, this time for grassy routes, I guess. This includes for Johto 26, 27, 28, 30, 31, 32, 34, 35, 42, 43, 44, 45, 47, and the Runes of Elfgrass. Linoone is Raticate's equivalent for Hoenn and can be bred down to Zigzagoon, which evolves at level 20. Both are pure normal types, as their archetype tends to be. Both are fast, and Linoone is relatively well known for gimmicky belly drum sets, which max out its attack for half its health, then slamming into stuff very hard, something it does very well due to Gluttony, which causes it to immediately eat its berry upon using belly drum. Not the most reliable play, but fun when it works. Both also have pickup, which is a great ability, and really great because in Hoenn they're available very early, but this is mid-game. There are more reasonable choices for a pickup Pokemon than catching a Linoone. Zigzagoon is also one of the cutest Pokemon with its big dopey eyes and full body raccoon tail. It's fucking super cute. Whismur is kinda dull, pure normal, as are its evolutions Loudred, which it becomes at 20 and Exploud at 40. They center on using sound-based moves and not all that well. Mixed attack and special attack, goodish HP and mediocre elsewhere. They're swimming with sound moves, but just don't use them very well, and they're only equipped with Soundproof, which is great for Exploud Mirror Match and not very great anywhere else. Sinnoh Sound also has its own Pokemon, first Bidoof, pure normal, Rattata's Sinnoh equivalent, and becoming Bibarel at level 15, which also gains the Water type. Bibarel is well known for being the best HM slave in the game. In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it learns 7 of the 8. It's unfortunately just held back by a mediocre and almost entirely even stat spread. A real shame is it has 2 great abilities that it struggles to use. Simple doubles the effectiveness of stat changes. Sword Stance is a +4, a free 3 times boost, while Defense Crow would be a +2. If allowed to set up with Simple, even Bibarel could become a huge threat. All this also applies to negative effects. Intimidate is a negative sword stance, so there is some risk. Meanwhile, their other ability and their signature ability, Unaware, is likewise pretty crazy, causing them to ignore the stat boosts of opponents, shutting down setup from opponents, and allowing setup on Bibarel's end to be even more potent. In a scenario where Bibarel can be allowed to set up, it could easily become unstoppable through either ability. It's just a difficult Pokemon to enable that setup on. The other Sinnoh Sound Pokemon is Buizel, which evolves into Floatzel at level 26. Both are pure water. Buizel looks really good and gets so fucking hideous when it evolves, which is kind of a shame. Floatzel's really fast and a really solid physical water type, great at using Waterfall and the priority move Aqua Jet. Maybe not Gyarados tier and probably introduced too late in the game to really see use, but really fun, and with Swift Swim, Floatzel's speed is 230 in Rain. 230! That's faster than the fastest Pokemon by 50 speed when in Rain. On Rain teams, you know, there's a big grind to catch it up, but it's unstoppably fast in Rain. How about the radio to do a Swarm? Love Disc appears on Route 27 during a Swarm while surfing. Love Disc is pure water and most notably has a 50% chance of carrying Heart Scales, used to pay the move relearner. Its speed is decent at 97 and good in Rain because of Swift Swim, but every other stat is really bad, to the point that Love Disc is unironically unusable outside of farming Heart Scales. Route 45 has its own swarm, Swablu, a normal flying type, that becomes a dragon flying Altaria at 35. It's a pretty good dragon too, shame it isn't available before Claire. Outside of the huge ice weakness, it's one of the few special dragons available yet, and gets great coverage in TMs, like fucking Ice Beam, a move that ironically smokes Altaria. Natural Cure is a great ability too, letting Altaria wick off any status just by switching out, which ups its already decent survivability. Oh, fuck. So anyway, let's get to the Safari Zone again. Keep things mixed up. The base mechanics are still bad and have a new layer of bad on top, area customization. Beginning in the post-game, the player can set objects in areas which causes rare and later generation Pokemon to appear. Sounds all fine and dandy, overcomplicated maybe, but the real issue is the level up system, a disaster of a system that drags out the Safari Zone for literal months, although there is a cheat code that instantly levels up everything that I don't exactly not recommend using. Each of the items that can be placed as part of a group, forest, mountain, waterside, or plains, which while placed in an area will level up extremely slowly. Once a day when the player turns on the game, you have to check in every single day, and with protection against time advancements. On day 10, plains items double in value, but only for an area that had a plains item in it, meaning you can only level up 6 areas at a time. On day 20, the same happens to forests, on, and then on day 50 it loops and the plains items become worth 3 each. Each area can only have a maximum of 30 items, and some Pokemon are locked behind huge requirements. Bagon, for example, requires 56 peak objects and 35 forest objects, requiring at least 120 days of checking in every day, nearly half a year, to slowly level it up with specific placement to get it to show up. It's hellish without the code, and honestly even without the code it's still very miserable. So many Pokemon are locked behind this stupid shit, and the Safari mechanics don't get any better while hunting down some of the insane and frankly obnoxious things that somehow ended up here. The one nice thing I can say is that Pokemon here are decently high leveled, which makes them reasonably easy to integrate into teams for Kanto. Locked behind a huge weight in the peak area is Vigoroth, the evolution of Slackoth starting at level 18, which becomes Slacking at 36, all pure normal types. Vigoroth is the odd one out of the family, a moderately fast physical Pokemon with Vital Spirit to stop sleep, but the other two are the really interesting ones, sharing a negative signature ability Truants. Every other turn is skipped. They attack once, then they loaf around and do nothing the next. So they're just terrible, right? Not quite. I mean, yeah, but Slacking stats are higher than the pseudo-legendaries, a class including Dragonite and Tyranitar who have exactly 600 base stat total. Slacking's 670 base stat total outdoes most legendaries, and its attack and HP are especially insane. Working around its downside makes it an incredible killer, especially when using Geiga Impact, Hyper Beam's physical retrain, which would already cause it to be recharging on the turns where it has Truant, plus Earthquake and other powerful physical moves. It's hard as fuck to use, but when used well it can easily stomp an entire team. Also in the peak area is Lairon, the evolution of Aeron at level 32, and Lairon becomes Aggron at 42. All three are Steel Rock, a little bit of a rough type honestly, especially given that they have great defense and good attack, and not much else to speak for. 4 times ground and fighting weaknesses, on top of water weakness and poor special defense and low speed make Aggron way flimsier than it should be. 9 resistances is really great, but its weaknesses are extremely exploitable. New good rock moves help, and Aggron can hit hard, but that's assuming it doesn't crumble before that. It's definitely an okay Pokemon, but it's nothing special, especially for how late it comes in the game. Sturdy does nothing, but Rock Head, while normally mediocre, is actually great for the line. Head Smash is a rock type recoil move that Aggron doesn't take damage from, potentially strong and nasty given its stab, but I just don't see Aggron lasting all that long anyway. The peak area also has Zangoose, a normal type which has good attack and decent speed. There are better physical normals running around, but its signature move Crush Claw is good, 75 attack before the stab bonus, and with a 50% chance of lowering defense. It's mostly a question of if it can survive a turn to use it. Zangoose's ability is Immunity, a reference to the Pokemon it's frequently paired with, a poison type we'll get to soon, which prevents it from getting poisoned. A fine ability, really helpful in game when getting poisoned is a huge headache because of backtracking to Pokemon centers. Lastly in the peak is Spheal, the big chunky ice water boy, who becomes Celio at 32 and Walrein at 44. Slow but bulky, they aren't all that great, a bit too unfocused statistically. They have an ice type variant of Rollout called Ice Ball, which is a bit confusing, as Ice and Rock both exist basically to shit on flying, but I guess it ensures stab. Thick Fat is fine but unnecessary, it already doesn't care about ice, it makes fire resistant instead of neutral, which is okay, but not amazing, and its other ability Ice Body heals it slowly over time in Hail. A cool ability considering the opponents will be taking chip damage from Hail simultaneously, but Ice and by extension Hail aren't really good types for actual sane use. The desert has Lotad, a cute little lily pad Kappa that becomes Lombre at 14, and Ludicolo by Waterstone from there. All three are Water Grass, which is a pretty great type, only weak to bug, poison, and flying, a bad type, a defensive type, and a good type, while resisting some common stuff and especially countering water types incredibly. It used to be a counter for a certain extremely wet legendary. This water countering is carried further into its abilities. Jumping into Rain lets Swift Swim boost it to 140, very good speed, while Rain Dish, the line signature ability, gives them slow passive healing in Rain. A bit too slow to matter, but not an awful boost either. Swift Swim is definitely better though. Spinda, pure normal, is more notable for its gimmick than anything it actually does. Each Spinda randomly generates spots when it's encountered, giving Spinda about 4 billion variants for spot placement. Each one is a bit unique. Spinda tries to play around with Confusion. It has both Own Tempo and Tangled Feet, Confusion-related abilities, as well as Dizzy Punch, which has a chance of confusing the target, and Teeter Dance, its signature status move, which guarantees confusion. It's not a very good strategy, especially given Spinda has exactly 60 in every stat, which is pretty bad across the board. Trapinch and Vibrava both appear in the desert. Trapinch becomes Vibrava at 35 and then becomes Flygon at 45. Trapinch is pure ground with Arena Trap. It's a Dugtrio Jr. and pretty broken in that regard, while its evolutions are Ground Dragon and both have Levitates. Good type and ability combo. Double Ice weakness is bad, Dragon weakness isn't a huge deal, plus it has ground and electric immunities off the bat. Attack and speed are both 100 on Flygon, while everything else is a respectable 80. It's pretty decent, but it's mostly getting hurt by getting shafted on moves for seemingly no reason. Flygon didn't get Dragon Dance, which almost every other dragon and tons of non-dragons have, until the 7th fucking generation. It's good, fun to use, and a great design. It's a big-ass dragonfly with goggles for its dragonfly eyes to protect it from sand. Really cool design. It's just so oddly hated by Game Freak that it lacks tools that would make it great. Both Cacnea and Cacturn are also in the desert. Cacnea is pure grass and evolves into Cacturn at 32, where it also gains the dark typing. They're kind of bizarre. They have really high attack and special attack, and very bad everything else, so what it's supposed to be doing is a mystery to me. The typing on Cacturn is pretty rough, 6 weaknesses, which make it surviving to be a mixed attacker doubtful. That said, it gets Sand Veil to boost evasion, and while normally they'd take damage from Sandstorm, Veil also protects them from that, which means that they could potentially be run on a Sand team. That all said, they're better Sand support Pokemon, especially given Sand supports 3 types in the first place. Hippopotas is pure ground and evolves into the also pure ground Hippowdon at level 34. They have Sandstream. That pretty much makes them good by default, but not quite as good as Tyranitar. That said, unlike Tyranitar, they get Stab on Earthquake and good coverage in the Elemental Fang moves, Thunder, Ice, and Fire, and have great physical stats. They're worth using for Sand teams, but probably not above using a Tyranitar for the same purpose. And the last one for the desert is Carnivine, which is pure grass that levitates. The color scheme is cool. It's a, mixed grass attacker, terrible, slow. I don't know what Carnivine is supposed to do. Doesn't even benefit all that much from Levitate, since it already resists ground. I don't know. Alright, Plains time. Houndoom, Houndour's evolution. Houndoom is a bit hurt by Dark no longer being purely special. That said, it has Dark Pulse to fill the void, and is still a great special attacker with decent physical attack if it desires to run Crunch instead. Early Bird is fine. Houndoom isn't going to be using Rest though, while Flash Fire is pretty great on Houndoom. 165 special attack when using fire moves if it can switch into a fire move or just catch one in doubles, which isn't bad in the slightest. Surskit is a Bug Water type with Swift Swim, but becomes the Bug Flying type Masquerain at level 22, swapping out Swift Swim for Intimidate. Surskit is terrible, and Masquerain is to this day the worst Intimidate user. 50% free damage from Stealth Rock, 5 weaknesses, and aggressively mediocre stats. Masquerain is not worth using, even as far as the usually awful Bug Flying type goes. Pretty much purely because of its type, Masquerain is not worth using in the slightest. The Bug Flying type is just one of the worst in the game. But the fact that it has Intimidate and it can't save it is funny. Manectric is also available. It's a pure electric, which has a pre-evolution electric that it evolves from at level 26. Static is okay on it, not great. Manectric isn't that bulky. Lightning Rod seems okay, but in Generation 4, Lightning Rod doesn't offer immunity. On Marowak it doesn't matter, it's already immune. For Manectric, it's soaking in damage it probably would prefer not to take. Resisted damage, but still, it's a decent fast special attacker of which the electric type isn't really lacking in. Shinx is also pure electric, one of the 6 Pokemon on the Cookie Cutter Diamond and Pearl team. At 15 it becomes Luxio, then at 30 it becomes Luxray. While okay everywhere, its star stat is attack, which isn't exactly awful, but Thunderfang isn't exactly getting carried either. In later generations it has a bit more to work with, but non-stab Crunch isn't exactly gonna fix it. What does sort of carry it is one of its abilities. While Rivalry isn't that interesting, it does get Intimidate, and outside of Masquerain, pretty much every Pokemon with Intimidate is good by default. Chansey still evolves into Blissey and has a new pre-evolution Happiny, also pure normal, which evolves into Chansey by leveling up while holding an Oval Stone during the day because it's emulating holding an egg. It's a cute little thing. The luck instance needed to breed it is in Kanto. Don't worry too much about Happiny, it doesn't do a lot. Chansey and Blissey still both serve as amazing special walls. Natural Cure enhances their survivability, and Serene Grace, while extremely gimmicky on them, lets them use their massive move pool to pull funny shenanigans. That said, they're still way better as competitive stallers than useful in-game in any practical way. Seedot and Nuzleaf are both available, counterparts to Lotad. Seedot is pure grass and evolves into Nuzleaf at 14, making it Grass Dark, then into Shiftry by Leafstone. And he's literally just a Tengu, but it's cool. I love how Japanesey Gen 1 and 2 designs are, and Shiftry fits in well even though it was introduced in Gen 3. Johto especially feels incredibly Japanesey with its temples and quiet wooden houses, and that's one thing I really love about it. That said, Shiftry is another weird grass mixed attacker. 160 speed in Sun with Chlorophyll makes it an okay option for Sun teams, while Early Bird does literally nothing for it. Funnish Pokemon in Sun, especially because it's one of the few Chlorophyll users that has Stab Dark. Don't use it if trying to make it something usable. Nosepass is pure rock. It's a Compass Maui statue. What are those called? The Easter Island heads? That's a funny idea. And it's got like an Italian uncle in the form of Probopass, its new Generation 4 evolution, which gains the Steel type on top of the Rock type. That's pretty cool. How does it evolve? Oh, by the electric field like Magneton, so in Heart Gold and Soul Silver it evolves by transfer. Epic, thanks. Rock Steel, like with Aggron, makes this Pokemon a little risky, but both of its defenses are good. The biggest problem is it does nothing else. It's certainly not a great rock attacker, and sturdy as a non-ability, and while Magnet Pull is better on it than the Magnemite line because it can use Earthquake, although not excessively well, but it can, even if you could get Probopass, I probably wouldn't use it. Finally, there's Riolu, the baby form of the first intentional gigantic furry Shilmon, Lucario, which it becomes via friendship in the day. Riolu is pure fighting, Lucario is fighting steel. Hard to deny it's decent, 9 resistance and immunity, mixed attack with good speed, which it can play off into some solid fighting action like Aura Sphere, which is a special fighting move, or a bunch of physical fighting moves, and some steel stuff. While both of its abilities are oddly flinch-based and therefore pretty situational. Steadfast and Inner Focus, which it double resists dark moves anyway, so I don't think a lot of flinches are going to be occurring on it regardless. It's not spectacular, but it's not bad. Alright, moving to the forest. I'm sorry. I know the Safari Zone is big, I had to play through it all. It sucks. Electabuzz breeds into Elekid and now evolves into Electivire, which it reaches by trading with the Electrizer, which is available in Kanto after getting all 16 badges. Electabuzz and Elekid have Static, which is okay, but Electivire has a signature ability to use, Motor Drive. It's Volt Absorb, but it gives speed boosts instead of HP, and for what it's worth, that's pretty decent if it can be baited. Electivire already has pretty good speed, it's just the fact that it's weirdly physical that's kinda questionable, although its special attack is still passable. Thunder Punch is good, but not enough to build a Pokemon around. That said, its coverage isn't bad at all, it learns a good chunk of physical TMs, Earthquake, Thief, Rock Slide. Rad design, big stupid kill monkey, and pretty fun to use, although certainly not the best electric type in the series. Shuppet is a pure ghost and becomes Bayonet at 37. Shuppet is pretty cute for a tissue. Both have Insomnia and Frisk, okay ability and useful for farming items, but nothing that rescues Bayonet from being a slow physical ghost. The only physical stab it gets is Shadow Sneak, which is a decent move, but nothing worth writing home about, especially when its only other option is Shadow Claw via TM. So quick advisory, Beldum and Metang are available in this area, but do not catch them in the Safari Zone. Beldum's line has a catch rate of 3, the lowest catch rate in the game, only shared with legendaries, and not even all the legendaries at that. And you know what legendaries can't do? Remain at full health, be impossible to status, and run away. Roamers can run away, but they maintain health and status, and they can be trapped with mean look. This catch rate gives Beldum a catch rate of less than 0.5%, roughly 1 in 200, while trying to contend with it fleeing every few turns. Even if you could throw 6 mud at it, it would get up to an incredible 1.5% catch rate, and then instantly run away. There's a Beldum available in Kanto via trade for Fortress. It's lower level and Beldum is a bitch to level, but trust me, the Safari Zone Beldum and Metang ain't worth it in the slightest. The whole line is still Psychic. Beldum becomes Metang at 20 and then into Metagross at 45. The whole line is great. Well, Beldum isn't, it only gets non-stab takedown, but the rest are. Clear Body prevents them from having their stats lowered. As a pseudo-legendary like Dragonite and Tyranitar, Metagross has a 600 base stat total. While a bit slow, its attack and defense are amazing, while everything else is pretty solid. It's one of the few steel types with the stats and moveset to actually use it for attacks, and while physical psychic is a bit lacking this gen, Zen Headbutt is solid enough to be there for Metagross. Also, I really like that Metagross is a pseudo that isn't a Dragon-like creature, which is something that is exceedingly uncommon for whatever reason. Budu is also available, the new pre-evolution of Gen 3's Rosalia, which also has a new evolution, Roserade, the only Pokemon to get both at once. Coincidentally, the Rose Incense used to breed Budu is the only one available before Kanto, as it belongs to a Pokemon you can't get before the Elite Four. Budu evolves by Friendship during the day, and Rosalia by Shiny Stone. The entire line is Grass Poison, a fairly common type, but Roserade does play into different strengths with those. Poison Point is okay as an ability as always, but Natural Cure is the real winner, Free removal of status is really good. Roserade is very special oriented, special attack and defense are really good, and speed is decent. While their grass poisons tend to be mixed, Roserade instead focuses on big special hits naturally instead of using Sun as a crutch. Roserade is a great choice for grass types outside of Sun teams, something that's hard to say about things like Victreebel that crutch on it. Moving on to the swamp is Duskull. I think it's my second favorite design of all time, and definitely my favorite that's available in this game. I love the Reaper Lantern, the one eye shared between the sockets. It's really clever. Both of its evolutions are kinda ugly and plain though, but Duskull's great. The whole line is pure Ghost, evolving into Dusclops at 37 to match Shuppet, but then just getting another evolution via trade with Reaper Cloth, which can't be found until Mount Silver. Duskull has Levitate, Dusclops and Dusknoir have Pressure, which works okay for them. They're stealthy and defensive, extremely slow and with okay attack, but mostly they're to stall out pressure with Spite and other gimmicky strategies. It could probably be used to okay effect in games, but it's mostly just silly gimmicks for trolling people in the multiplayer. Bagon is Gen 3's actual Dragon pseudo-legendary. It evolves into Shelgon at 30 and Salamence at 50. The lore of Bagon centers around it wanting to learn how to fly, so like the Dratini line, the first two stages are Dragon and have Rockhead, mostly for lore reasons as they jump off cliffs trying to learn to fly and need the protection. The only move that they have that actually works with Rockhead is Double Edge, which is okay on them, but nothing spectacular. While Salamence gains the flying type and swaps abilities to Intimidate, a broken ability on an extremely broken and powerful Pokemon. Fantastic attacking stats and speed, it just shits all over everything, and being found in the Safari Zone makes it easy to get caught up. Very worth using for someone who wants to use a dragon, because this thing just dragon dances and outrages to victory. It's fucking really good Pokemon. Pachirisu is a Pika clone, electric type and not just fast but mediocre like the others, but somehow fast but mediocrely defensive. Runaway sucks, pickup is good but available on better things. The Marshland has Seviper, counterpart to Zangoose, a pure poison type edgelord snake. Its signature move Poison Tail has an increased crit rate and a chance for poison. Zangoose having immunity kinda makes it the lesser of the pair. Shedskin is decent though. The decent attack is nice, but I don't understand why it has equal special attack and awful everything else. A slow mixed poison attacker with no bulk or speed is kinda disastrous. Krogunk is much better poison type, mixed with fighting. It has a pretty cool type table, 4 times psychic weakness is a disaster, and flying and ground are a bit rough, but it also has 6 resists. With Dry Skin, it also gains passive healing in rain and immunity, which make it fun in rain doubles especially, at the cost of another weakness. Krogunk evolves into Toxicroak at 37, which is the same but better. Anticipation, its other ability, is a nothing ability, but besides the fun typing and ability, it's really not all that great. The attack is goodish and everything else is okay. It's a fun Pokemon to use, but it's not like exceptionally good. There's so much Safari Zone. Meditite is available in the mountain area and evolves into Medicham at level 37. Both are fighting Psychic, a cool type, but not one that actually has a lot of interaction with other types. They're pretty neutral on both weaknesses and resists. Their signature ability, Pure Power, doubles their attack to a respectable 120, assuming the ability doesn't get switched or negated, but everything else is pretty discouraging. Its high jump kick game is tremendous, as are its elemental punches and other physical moves, but it's really not that interesting to use. Volbeat is kind of an interesting case. While many Pokemon are designed to have counterparts, Tauros and Miltank retroactively, Seviper and Zangoose, Lunatone and Solrock, and so on, Volbeat and Illumis kind of fall into line with the Nidorans. Illumis can breed eggs that hatch into Volbeat, and in every generation after this one, Volbeat can breed into Illumis, implying they're gendered versions of each other. Volbeat and Illumis are both pure bug types, but also play pretty differently from each other. Volbeat is mediocre, its stats are bad, Illuminate is barely an ability, and Swarm isn't very helpful for something that dies in one attack. Although Volbeat does get Tail Glow, which is Sword stands for special attack, it could potentially get Volbeat really big, but its base special attack is pretty miserable. If it got a few off, it would be okay, but it's not something that's likely to happen with something so weak. Illumise is moderately more specialized, okayish speed, and with mediocre but not unusable special stats. Being a special bug and being frail isn't really going to fly, and Oblivious is a bit too situational, but Tinted Lens is a good ability that doesn't really help a Pokemon this bad, but is okay in theory. Neither is worth using, by the way. Also available is Lunatone, which has a counterpart, but they don't breed into each other. Lunatone is Rock Psychic with Levitate. I think the moon design works on it, but really only in conjunction with the other. 6 common weaknesses really hurt Lunatone, even with 5 resists and a ground immunity. Water, Grass, and Dark are all types that are frequent to see and would make Lunatone go to the dark side. Fuck. It has an okay special attack and middling stats elsewhere, and I mean, Special Rock isn't an incredible combination, and Special Psychic is a group that's loaded with things far better than Lunatone. We're getting to the end, I swear. The Rocky Beach has Guyable, a Dragon Ground type, and Gen 4's pseudo-legendary line. At 24 it becomes Gobite, and at 48 Garchomp. All three have Sand Veil, a great ability. Garchomp is great outside of Sand too, all around great stats, but good speed and fantastic attack are all that matter. Swords Dance is set up, it's survivable enough to do so, then spam Earthquake and Outrage, and it hardly needs anything else. Maybe Stone Edge for coverage. Pretty much shits on everything that doesn't have incredibly good ice moves and survivability. Dragon 2 I guess, but that's just called a Garchomp mirror match. Like Salamence, this is something that fits on basically any team and just completely destroys everything. In the Wasteland is Breloom, the best catcher in the series. It evolves from Shroomish, pure grass, at level 23 and gains the fighting type too. All mushroom Pokemon get Spore, well, I mean Breloom doesn't, it needs to get it as a Shroomish, at level 45, which is a bit cruel. That's a lot of waiting to evolve. But it can also get False Swipe through breeding, so setting it all up to be the perfect catcher takes quite a bit of effort and a fresh Shroomish, but it's definitely worth it for someone who wants to use it like that. Unlike Parasect, it isn't terrible, great attack, passable speed, and the mediocrity elsewhere matters little when it exists just to be a catcher. It has the potential to be decent in game just based on its massive attack and fighting stab. The weaknesses it has, which are numerous and common, are pretty rough, but it's invaluable nonetheless. Effect Spore doesn't help much, it just interrupts its usage of Spore. On the other hand, Poison Heal, the Shroomishes line signature ability, heals it while poisoned, which can be induced with a Toxic Orb, giving it decent healing and protecting it from status to improve its skill as a catching aid. It comes too late in Heart Gold and Soul Silver to be reasonable to make for this game, to be honest, but for someone willing to put in the effort, it's really great. Solrock is Lunatone's counterpart, Rock Psychic and Levitate again. It's basically the same thing, but it gets Solar Beam, which is nice, but won't suddenly make it some god on some teams. Skorupi is Bug Poison, a mediocre type, but thankfully on evolution into Drapion at 40, swaps Bug for Dark. Dark Poison is a great type on its own, only weak to ground, something bolstered by Battle Armor, a clone of Shell Armor that prevents critical hits, and lets the already defensive Pokemon survive longer on top of decent attack and speed. Sniper is fine as ability, but no one uses it on Drapion. The thing that makes Drapion great is Acupressure, a move that boosts a stat at random by 2 stages, including evasion and accuracy, which if given time to set up and with healing through Rest and Black Sludge make Drapion borderline unkillable. Drapion is the king of the battle frontier. Using something with Trick to give an opponent a choice item can give Drapion plenty of time to reach final form and decimate basically anything in the game. The Savannah has Torkoal, Pure Fire, despite looking like it should have Rock or Ground. It's not that those types would make for good combinations. The design is really slick though, I like the nice colors with the red coming out from the inside of its shell. White Smoke is a signature copy of Clear Body, which protects Torkoal from stat drops, which is an objectively great ability. That all said, incredibly slow fire type with high physical defense and mediocre stats elsewhere is not amazing. It can't really do anything in this generation, but eventually becomes kind of a staple in some teams. That's later, different video. Finally for the Safari Zone is Corphish, Pure Water, which evolves into Crawdon to level 30 and gains the Dark type. Hypercutter and Shell Armor are both good protective boosts for the awkward little lobsters, and while slow, they're still decent physical waters, a competitive area to be sure, but they also get solid Dark Stab and Knockoff and Pursuit to help a bit. Good choice, but still not any better than Gyarados is really. We're going to take a break from the Safari Zone, but we're not quite to Kanto yet. Various grass routes. In Johto this includes 29, 33, 36, 37, 38, 39, 46, and 48, as well as the National Park, have their own Hoenn and Sinnoh sounds. The Sinnoh sound has Shinx, which is also in the Safari, but the Hoenn sound has +1 Minun, a pair of Pika clones designed to show off double battles in Generation 3. They're both electric types, fast but otherwise thoroughly mediocre, and exist to show off a new gimmick that makes them semi-usable in doubles. Plusle has the ability Plus, while Minun has the ability Minus. Plus boosts the special attack of a Pokemon with Minus by 50%, giving Minun an extremely good 150, while Minus does the same for a Pokemon with Plus, giving Plusle an extremely good 170. It's an okay gimmick, but it also crumbles to Earthquake, which wipes both at once. Fun gimmick, but pretty much unusable in game because it requires double battles. The temples also have sound encounters. Sprout, Bell, and Burn Towers share Zigzagoon and Spinda for Hoenn, and Meditite and Chatot for Sinnoh. Chatot is normal flying, and honestly, it's bad. Its only moderately good stats are special attack and speed, it's frailer than garbage, and Kenai and Tangled Feet are pretty situational, but its gimmick is hilarious, a signature move called Chatter. Chatter lets the player record their own voice, and the game plays it back. This is obviously a terrible idea, and incredibly obvious for anyone who's ever been on the internet, and many people got traded Chatots that screamed racial slurs, and not just that, its chance of causing confusion is based on the volume of the recording, the louder the better. Sorry to all the parents who got these games for their kids. Anyway, eventually Game Freak removed its ability to record sound in Generation 6, which is shockingly long to fix something this poorly planned out. The bug catching contest has a ton of new stuff too. The mechanics are the same, and thankfully it's a better sub-game than the Safari Zone, but everything here is a bug, so many of them are just not very useful. First, the Wurmple line, the only line to have a split evo that evolves again. Wurmple is a pure bug with Shield Dust, it's a Caterpie clone, and evolves into either Silcoon or Cascoon, also pure bug at level 7, based on personality value. Effectively, what it evolves into is 100% random, and it's impossible to know which it's going to evolve into without cheating or hacking. These two are nearly identical Metapod clones, although Silcoon is kind of weirdly cute in a way, both have shed skin. At 10, Silcoon becomes Beautifly, while Cascoon becomes Dustox. Beautifly is bug flying, one of the worst types in the game, and it's terrible on top of that. Horrible stats except special attack and nothing to use it with. It dies to anything, and its ability Swarm will never go off. Dustox is barely better, Bug Poison is barely better than Bug Flying, and Shield Dust is okay, but Dustox is frail as hell despite its better stats being its defensive ones. Its attacking stats are awful and it can't take advantage of either of its types. Basically, the whole line is a cute play on the Caterpie and Weedle thing mashed into one, but nothing here is even moderately useful. Nincada also has a split evolution of sorts, and both are fairly usable too, a rarity for bugs. Nincada is bug ground with compound eyes, decent stuff, the type is pretty good, but of course its evolutions are the real good stuff. At level 20, Nincada evolves into Ninjask, but if the player has a spare Pokeball and an empty party slot, it also evolves into Shedinja at the same time. The cicada sheds its shell, and its shell becomes its own thing. Ninjask is bug flying, which is an awful type, but it has incredible speed and decent attack, while it has also everything else. But if it can set up or get some boosts via Baton Pass, it can get pretty crazy because of speed boost. Even 1 Protect puts Ninjask well above anything else in speed, and from there, with some luck, it can do some pretty decent sweeping. Shedinja is one of the most unique Pokemon in the game. Bug Ghost, a bad type, but intentionally so, and it always has exactly 1 HP. Any attack will knock it out, but its signature ability Wonder Guard makes it immune to all non-super effective attacks. Shedinja can only be damaged by Flying, Rock, Ghost, Fire, and Dark moves, as well as passive damage from things like entry hazards, weather, and status. In a scenario where an opponent has none of these, they basically just lose. Outside of decent attacks, it's pretty awful statistically, but if the opponent can't hurt it, it can set up endlessly and destroy. Not to mention, through shenanigans, Wonder Guard can be passed on to other Pokemon in doubles, say Sableye who has no weaknesses. Insanely fun ability to kick around with, even if Shedinja is pretty bad otherwise. Both Kricketot and Kricketune are available as well, both bugs. Kricketot becomes Kricketune at 15, and somehow gets a worse ability, from Shedskin to Swarm. Kricketune is a very mediocre early route bug. Moving on, we have Combee. At 21, female Combee become Vespiquen, while male Combee don't evolve. It's a tad gimmicky, but it's cute given the Queen Bee theming. The other thing about this is that female Combee are far rarer. It's like a 1:8 ratio for female Combee. The Vespiquens are harder to get, which is kind of a neat aspect of it too. The line is unfortunately bug flying, they're basically fucked from the start. Honey Gather, Combee's signature ability is pick up, but it only picks up honey. The higher the level it is, the more likely it is to find honey after each battle. Honey is borderline useless in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. In Diamond and Pearl, is used on trees to get unique encounters. Here it's just a mediocre healing item that can only be slowly farmed in the post-game. Vespiquen's defenses are good, not great, but good, but nothing else is really standout. It's around passable and miserably slow. Pressure and defensive could be an okay combo, but with the typing that bad, it's just not going to happen. Vespiquen has multiple signature moves that are good on paper. Defense Order increases both defense stats, Heal Order recovers 50% HP, and Attack Order is a 90 base power move with 100 accuracy and an increased crit ratio. All great tools on a Pokemon whose type is so bad that it will never live to use them. And we're almost at Kanto, I swear. Route 34 has Ralts as a Swarm. Pure Psychic, which evolves into Kirlia at 20. At 30, all Kirlia become Gardevoir, but male Kirlia can become Gallade instead with a Dawnstone, which makes them Psychic Fighting type. Ralts, Kirlia, and Gardevoir all have Synchronize, which is a good ability to ward off or punish status, or Trace, one of the funniest abilities in the game, which copies the opponent's ability on Switch-In. Copy Flash Fire on a Fire type to screw them over, or Water Absorb, or something epic like Wonder Guard, leaving it only vulnerable to Dark Ghost and Bug. It's a very versatile and fun ability to screw with opponents. On top of that, Gardevoir is just good. Great special attack and special defense, and passable speed with fun abilities make it a great psychic choice, despite getting it so late and at a fairly low level. As with Medicham, who it shares typing with, Gallade has fairly neutral interactions with every other type. Steadfast is incredibly situational too, however it has fantastic attack, good speed, and really strong special defense on top of good moves and coverage. Tons of fighting stuff, Psycho Cut, a physical psychic move, Night/Dark, and Leaf Blade Grass, which let it lay into things really well. Like Guard, it's all around really solid and fun to mess with, and with special defense so good, it actually has a chance to set up a Sword Stance for a sweep. The forests also have a pool of sound Pokemon, Elix Forest and Johto, Viridian, and Kanto. Sinnoh has Budew and Carnivine, while both of Hoenns are not in the Safari Zone. Numel is Fire Ground, a type that's actually okay, 4 times weak to water and 2 times weak to ground, but with a good spread of resistances and an immunity to balance it out. Oblivious is situational, but Simple can be really good if allowed to boost. At level 33, it loses both of those abilities and becomes Camerupt with Magma Armor, no one is going to try to freeze a Camerupt, and Solid Rock, which is a solid ability, but it won't save it from literally any water attack. Both of Camerup's attack stats are good, it can hit hard with Earthquake and Flamethrower, but its speed is pretty abysmal and its defenses aren't great. It's far from the worst fire type in the game, and its typing is pretty good, but it's nothing special either. Spoink is pure Psychic and evolves at 32 into Grumpig. Oblivious is situational, but Thick Fat is crit free resists. They have okay special defense, but are solidly mediocre in a type that is flooded with great Pokemon like Gardevoir. Alright, last Pokemon before Kanto. Whiscash via Fishing Swarm in Violet City. It evolves from Barboach at 30, and both are water ground, a great type that's only weak to grass. That said, this isn't Quagsire. Oblivious isn't great, and Anticipation is virtually useless, and while the HP stat is fat, nothing else is, just solid mediocrity. Finally, the SS Fast Aqua, and immediately changes to Gold, Silver, and Crystal are apparent. Most trainers use Generation 3 and 4 Pokemon on their teams, there's way more variety in Kanto. Vermilion on the other side looks good too, the houses have orange roofs and some really nice boats have occupied the harbor to fill it out. Wingull is available here as a swarm, a water-flying seagull with a sharp design that evolves into Pelipper at 25. As always, Keen Eye is extremely situational, especially this late into the game. Anything that wants to evade uses Double Team at this point. Pelipper is slow and defensive, but not great, but the typing doesn't exactly go against it. It's only weak to electric, although doubly weak, and rock while resisting a lot. I don't know if it could be used for effective stall, but water is already such a busy type. That training up a Pelipper is just not worth it. Vermilion Gym has had its quote-unquote puzzle restored, and for once the redesign is a downgrade. In Generation 2 it's just a walk to Lieutenant Surge, in Heart Gold and Soul Silver it's checking every trash can, praying the switch is in there, then guessing at an adjacent can, and if it isn't in there, starting the whole thing over. It's all random, so it can be really tedious and lengthy with bad luck. Surge's team is the same but higher level, this goes for all Kanto leaders, which is appreciated given how few levels are gained in Kanto in Gold, Silver, and Crystal. His whole team still spams Double Team, and is still all fast. It can be annoying, but any reasonably leveled ground type with Earthquake still absolutely sweeps it. The pace is way up from here to the end, I promise. There's no more Safari Zone. Case in point, Saffron. No Pokemon to get, just a short walk to the city. The green and gold colors look nice, the dojo actually looks like a dojo, and Silph Co looks like a real building. Sadly, like Gold, Silver, and Crystal, most of the buildings are empty, but the few that don't match are a good way to signify importance. The weird pink house is where Copycat lives, and she'll be important in a moment. The dojo has a new purpose outside of hinting at Tyrogue too, gym leader rematches, where they'll use stronger teams, especially good for the Johto leaders like Falkner, and will mix in newer generation Pokemon. Some of the Pokemon they use are even evolutions of Pokemon in their original teams. The teams are really well crafted. I think they nicely build on and capture each leader's teams and themes, without just doing the brilliant Diamond and Shining Pro method of copy-pasting Smogon sets at random. Saffron's gym is unchanged and puzzle, but is given a clean futuristic design with dark blues and light greens that look pretty slick. On top of higher levels, Sabrina has some new strategies, some that make her very threatening, some that are kinda questionable. Espeon now spams Calm Mind, pretty terrifying when mixed with its powerful Shadow Ball and Psychic that make even Gengar risky against her. It also has Skill Swap, but the AI isn't smart enough to steal an ability good enough to break anything, plus Synchronize to deter status. Mr. Mime's Filter makes it even bulkier on top of Light Screen and Reflect, and Alakazam doesn't have Recover anymore, which is nice, I guess. There's not much between Saffron and Celadon, but Voltorb Flip still replaces the Game Corner, which is the only place Porygon is available for some very high coin values. Better learn Voltorb Flip pretty well, but it's fun enough that it's not as bad as slot grinding. Porygon's whole line is pure normal. It evolves into Porygon 2 in the same way, via trade with upgrade, and has a new evolution, Porygon Z, which it evolves into by another trade while holding the Dubious Disc, which corrupts Porygon 2. The item is only available after getting all 16 badges though. It's also the only Pokemon that evolves twice by trade, so you can have a level 1 Porygon Z. Porygon and Porygon 2 have Trace, great ability that's extremely fun to use, and Porygon is still pretty great despite its evolution, while Porygon Z has Adaptability, a great ability that makes its normal stab moves incredible, but can also be used with its signature moves Conversion and Conversion 2 to apply to other types as well, which is great if extremely gimmicky and limiting, as the Porygons can learn a good portion of all special TMs. Their other ability, shared between all three, is their signature ability Download, giving it a free boost to attack or special attack depending on which of the opponent's defenses is lower upon being sent in. An attack boost for low defense and the same for special stats. This is a good boost, but most often it's one that they'll want to gain against something with low special, so it can be a bit of a wasted boost on physical attack. 2 and Z play pretty differently. 2 is solidly defensive, normal is only weak to fighting after all, but also has good special attack on top of that, made better with a good trace or download. Z drops its defenses to give itself great special attack and good speed, letting it toss out some really powerful killing moves on top of adaptability. Heart Gold and Soul Silver has such pretty colors, by the way. The dark greens in Celadon make it feel foresty despite the simple layouts and the modern buildings, like the glass department store in the Voltorb Flip building, while also blending in small town stuff like the restaurant being a cottage that kind of give it a feel of growth, which is fitting for the town with the grass gym. Celadon's gym has great changes in design and layout. Instead of a small gauntlet of trainers, it's a maze where breaks in the foliage indicate the path through the gates. Good navigation can dodge most of the trainers in the gym, and on top of that, it just looks pretty nice. Instead of bushes circling Erica, the gates are covered by mossy flowers, there's sprinklers and sunbeams coming in from the windows, and the walls even have some nice clouds painted on them. It actually kinda looks like a garden. Erica's whole team now has chlorophyll, making the formerly limp sun support a lot better, and making it harder to catch the sun and spam fire moves. Blossom has synthesis to heal and one-turn solar beams and sun, while Jumpluff uses extremely fast U-turns to honestly little effect, but it's a cool move. And Tangela can even gain boosts off of ancient power. She's got good synergy with her gimmick and can catch slower teams or ones that don't abuse sun well off guard. Looping down to Fuchsia, there's nothing to catch, but Fuchsia looks nice, save the eyesore that is the Pal Park, which stands where the Safari Zone once did, an area that allows players to transfer Pokemon up from the Generation 3 games. Good feature, and not nearly as broken as the Time Machine was. What used to be the pens in front of the Safari Zone are now little gardens hosting flowers, which is kinda cute. The house is at Pink Roof's a little gaudy, but it makes sense with the color theming of Kanto, while the Warden's house stands out looking a little more cabiny and old-timey. Fuchsia's gym is mostly the same, although Janine has been moved to where Koga used to be, kind of ruining the surprise of her being somewhere else. Janine is definitely the most improved in Kanto by far. Instead of Pokemon in the mid-30s, weaker than Claire, she now has much more reasonably leveled Pokemon. Other than that, she swapped one of the Weezings for a second Ariados. It's basically the same thing as before. Try to spread Toxic and use weak, frail Pokemon to lose pretty quickly and easily. Now for the long journey up to Cerulean. On Route 12, via Swarm, Relicanth is available. Relicanth is Water Rock, a lot of weaknesses, and a lot of resistances too. Its defense is great and its attack is good as well, but it's slow and pretty weak elsewhere. Swift Swim helps, boosting it to a good speed, and Rockhead lets it use Stab Head Smash really effectively, but again, in a literal sea of water types, Relicanth is far from the strongest of the physical water types. Lavender looks nice still pretty mountainous with its black gravelly roads. It also looks a bit more modern with the House of Memories and Radio Tower being redesigned to give them a little more flair, a dome over the graves of the Pokemon, while the Radio Tower is tall and dark green. It's comfy, but kinda retains that quiet, far-off aura. Rock Tunnel still sucks. Yep. That's all I have to say. The power plants changes visually with the smokestacks and pillars really kind of sell what it's supposed to be as opposed to just looking like a big house. Route 9 has a unique swarm for each version. Heart Gold gets Sableye, a dark ghost type, no weaknesses. Pass Wonder Guard onto this bad boy, set up for days and sweep. Anyway, Sableye has Keen Eye, okay but situational, but its signature ability is one of the most bizarre and awful abilities in the game. Stall makes Sableye move last in its priority bracket. It always goes last unless it uses a priority move, regardless of speed, and I have no idea what it was intended to do, outside of guaranteeing payback goes off, which doubles in power if the user moves last, but this is a move Sableye only gets through TM. It's an ability that categorically makes Sableye worse in basically any scenario. Outside of great typing, Sableye is not very good. It's already slow, none of its stats are particularly good, and outside of really gimmicky doubles sets, it's just not going to be successful. Soul Silver, meanwhile, gets Mawile, a pure steel type, and much better than its counterpart. Hypercutter is good, but Intimidate is obviously one of the greatest abilities in the game. Statistically, it's about as mediocre as Sableye, but the type and abilities are really fucking solid. It's hard to argue about a pure steel Intimidator. Cerulean City is fine, the shrubbery is nice, but the light blue houses are pretty gross. The rocket who hides the machine part needs to be battled before the part can be recovered, which is whatever, and the part has been moved to the redesigned gym, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Returning the part as before gets the magnet train up and running and gives the player the expansion card for the Kanto radio. Getting the train ticket leads to another Pokemon though. After visiting Copycat and Saffron and learning about her missing doll, then recovering the doll from the fan club in Vermilion, Stevenstone, the champion from Ruby and Sapphire, approaches the player and tells them of a new Pokemon roaming Kanto. In Heart Gold, the legendary Latios, and in Soul Silver, its counterpart Latios. Both are Dragon Psychic with Levitate, a type that's really good offensively but mixed defensively. A bunch of resists on common types, but also a lot of weaknesses, as Psychic and Dragon don't really cover each other well. Both have good speed and great special stats. Latios is moderately more specially defensive, and Latios is more specially offensive, but both are good Pokemon. Latios' signature move is Mist Ball, a strong Psychic move with a 50% chance to lower the opponent's special attack, making Latios even bulkier, while Latios is Luster Purge, the same move but it lowers special defense to make its attacks even more potent. Both are really great, and neither is entirely version exclusive, as an event item, the Enigma Stone, which was formerly distributed online but is still available through cheating and hex editing now, allows the player to get the opposite Lati in their game. Since Latios and Latios are caught at relatively decent levels, some catch-up may be necessary, but they're good enough to consider using even this late in the game. Lastly, before Cerulean, on Route 25 through Swarm is Baneri, a pure normal type that evolves into Lopunny with high happiness. A bit cruel given it begins with 0 happiness, but it's kind of funny. Lopunny is such a gross design, dumb furry bait. Baneri has Runaway, a nothing ability, and Klutz, the line signature ability that prevents it from using items in battle for some reason. Given most items are big solid boosts, it's a tad questionable outside of extremely gimmicky things like baiting Thief on Toxic Orb. I have no idea. Lopunny trades Runaway for Cute Charm, which is a fine ability. Fast and moderately defensive, yeah, they're more or less unusable. Cerulean Gym ditches the basic layout of walkways through a pool for a professional-looking swimming pool to swerve through, with trainers swimming around in it. It looks nice, and having Misty on the lifeguard tower is a nice touch, especially with the big glass window in the back. Misty's team is basically the same, higher level but mostly unchanged. The Quagsire is still a nice counter to electric spam, but there's still nothing outside of a couple ice moves on the team that stops grass spam. I guess the Starmie kinda stops everything spam because it's really fast. After defeating Misty, Suicune is finally available. It appears on multiple routes throughout the game and slowly leads the player to Route 25. Suicune has had some moveset touch-ups, but is still just a solidly defensive water Pokemon. Suicune doesn't get to be quite as broken as it once was in the competitive, but it's still pretty survivable. It's an okay water type with some good ice coverage thrown in. You know, it has legendary stats, so it's pretty decent, but there are lots of better water Pokemon. Pressure is a good ability on something that's as defensive as Suicune, but I don't know if it's going to make a lot of difference. In order to reach Viridian, Snorlax needs to be passed again. As before, it's very solid in special defense and attack, very good at surviving and stalling. Immunity protects it from poison, but Thick Fat has extra resists, mostly to special attacks, which is a good buff to Snorlax considering how specially defensive it is. Snorlax also gains a pre-evolution, Munchlax, which it can breed into with the Lax Incense, which can be found at Mount Mortar. Munchlax becomes Snorlax by happiness. It's barely worth anything as a baby, but it does have pickup instead of immunity. Snorlax is good, it sets up well with Curse and Rest for some destructive attacks, and it's caught at a fairly high level, so it's easy to incorporate despite coming so late. Viridian Force really shows how great Heart Gold and Soul Silver benefited from not being forced to work around the extreme limitations of the Game Boy Color's hardware. No longer hilariously bad hedge maze, Viridian has been restored to as it was, using roughly the same layout as it had in Red, Blue, and Yellow, with some stairs and areas of different heights for some texture. As Viridian exists again, Pikachu has moved out of Route 2 to rejoin the forest. The line is still not very good, they now have Static, as does half the roster of electric types, and they're still frail, fast, early route Pokemon. Pikachu's signature item Light Ball arguably makes it better than Raichu now, as its attack and special attack are higher than it for a minor speed decrease. If the Light Ball is held while breeding, Pikachu will now have a special signature move, Volt Tackle, a physical electric move that hits hard but deals recoil to the already frail line. An interesting gimmick, but not particularly useful. There are also much better electric types, tons available way earlier than this. Raikou, Electabuzz, Ampharos. Despite how iconic it is, Pikachu's line just won't ever be good no matter how hard they try. There's also a unique Pichu available, an alternate form that has never left Heart Gold and Soul Silver. By bringing a shiny event Pichu to Helix Shrine, which can still be hacked in, but official events are obviously long gone, a spiky-eared Pichu will appear. It's a Pichu with a minor alteration to its sprite, it's very cute, but otherwise it's just a Pichu that can't evolve or be traded. Pewter City has two kind of new things. First, a headbutt tree with a unique encounter table. There was one on 25 which held Slackoth, but I skimmed over it because I'd already talked about the Slackoth line, and there are more in Johto later, but they're locked behind the final HM. The tree in Pewter has Starly, Gen 4's early route bird, but one that's good actually. Starly is normal flying and evolves into Staravia at 14, then Staraptor at 34. Starly has Keen Eye, but its evolutions have Intimidate, which is off to a great start. Staraptor is both decently fast and has incredible attack. It uses Brave Bird, a powerful flying type move with recoil, then Roost to heal, and if it has to, it uses Close Combat as fighting coverage in return for normal stab. It's a really good physical bird, and I'd recommend using it if it came at an even remotely good time or level. Pewter hasn't changed much, it looks good. The redesign of the museum makes it actually look like a museum, and the inside looks very clean. The big change here is that the museum can now be used to revive fossils. Makes sense? Cinnabar is basically gone, and the museum was already studying fossils, plus it retroactively explains why Brock uses fossils himself. Helix fossils, Dome fossils, and Old Amber can all be found by rock smashing in the Runes of Elf, while Helix is exclusive to Heart Gold and Dome to Soul Silver. While the Gen 3 fossils, Claw and Root, can be found in the Cliff Cave via Rock Smash after getting the National Dex, Claw and Heart Gold, and Root and Soul Silver. It's also technically possible to revive the Gen 4 fossils, but neither are available in game, so I'll come back to that. Ammonite and Amistar are still very defensive, but with a type, Rock-Water, that has a lot of weaknesses. As the Helix fossil is exclusive to Heart Gold, they're only available without trading in that game. Its special attack is good, and it gets Ancient Power, but its speed really isn't. That said, Swift Swim helps a ton, bumping it up to a pretty good speed, making it moderately useful if a bit underwhelming. It also has Shell Armor, but it's so weakness prone that I don't know if Amistar could pull off Stall, and is almost certainly better off as a Rain Pokemon. Okay, but definitely not the best of the fossils, because that falls on the next two. Soul Silver really got the good end of the stick here. Kabuto and Kabutops, same types as the Omanyte line, and using effectively the same abilities, Swift Swim and Battle Armor are now great because of Swift Swim and the physical special split. Great attack and defense with good speed, 80 at base, 160 in rain, let Kabutops outspeed and shred virtually everything. This is a physical water that can match or even beat Gyarados in rain, not to mention Stab Stone Edge, Cross Scissor, and Night Slash for coverage. It's an extremely good Pokemon that gets revived at level 20, a bit too late to be incorporated. Aerodactyl is cool, Rock Flying has a lot of weaknesses, but its 130 speed is incredible and its attack is great. Stone Edge, all the Elemental Fang moves, Iron Head, it does one thing really good, and it does that extremely well. Pressure doesn't suit it very well, it's a massive physical sweeper, not a staller, and Rock Head gives it free double edge and takedown, moves it uses well, but not getting Head Smash, which it would love, is a shame. Anorith, which is revived from the Claw Fossil, available in Heart Gold, is Rock Bug, and as fossils do, evolves at 40 into Armaldo. It's a surprisingly good type, only weak to Steel, Water, and Rock, and it has great attack and good defense, bolstered by Battle Armor, only really held back by being slow as shit. Hell, its stabs have some good stuff now, Stone Edge, Cross Scissor. It's a bit tough to use, but not an awful mess. Lileep is Rock Glass, still a pretty decent defensive typing, and evolves into Cradily at level 40. Both have Suction Cups and okayish ability, but I can't imagine it seeing much use given how its stat looks. Decent-ish defenses, slow as hell and mediocre attack. It can sit around and stall, with some health-absorbing moves, Leech Seed maybe, and it can't be forced out because of Suction Cups, but you're not going to be stalling in-game. Pewter Gym has a new design and layout, with a simple straight path that requires fighting 2 trainers, but the option to just go around them as well. It's a bad design, but it makes sense given that this is technically the first gym in Kanto. The cobblestone and rocks look nice at the least. Brock has barely changed, as Kabutops has been given a more physical set. He attempts to use Sandstorm very slowly by using the move instead of an ability, and there's some better coverage, but as Sturdy doesn't do much in this generation, any grass type can steamroll his entire team in seconds. East of Pewter, Route 3, like 9, has version-exclusive swarms. Heart Gold gets Baltoy, Ground Psychic with Levitate, that evolves into Claydol at level 36. Slow, high defenses, but also 6 common weaknesses. Dark Water, Grass, and Ice especially bite. 2 immunities, counting Ground is nice, but I'm not sure what Claydol is supposed to do. Likewise, Soul Silver gets Sculpin, Pure Poison, which becomes Swalot at level 26. Liquid Ooze is an incredibly situational ability, although Sticky Hold is good. Not being able to lose items is always a nice benefit. High HP but moderate defenses and bad attacks and speed. It's made to use the gimmicky Stockpile moves. Using Stockpile up to 3 times raises defense and special defense, then Swallow can be used to heal or Spit Up used to do damage based on the number of stockpiles, at which point the counter is reset and the defenses are returned to normal. It's ultra gimmicky, pretty slow, and despite the good defensive typing, barely survivable. If anything, just use Muck. Route 1 has Poochyena as a swarm. It shares being Gen 3's Rattata with Zigzagoon, but it's pure dark and evolves into Mightyena at level 18. Poochyena has Runaway and Quick Feet, while Mightyena drops Runaway for Intimidate. Quick Feet bumps it from bad to tolerable in speed, but Mightyena is too frail to use it well, besides the fact that Intimidate is just so good. That said, Intimidate really doesn't save Mightyena. His attack is okay and everything else is pretty awful. It's slow, frail, and awkward to use. Even with a move like Howl for attack boosting, it borders on unusable. I'm just gonna ignore Viridian City until we get to Blue. Cinnabar is still destroyed, but has some paths that lead to the top of the volcano to get items after getting all 16 badges. It's a nice addition, and I think seeing the crater is cool, but it's largely an irrelevant change. Blaine is still moved to the Seafoam Islands, which have been restored to their former glory. More on that in a minute, but the biggest shame is that Blaine actually has a gym now. Him sitting alone in a cave crying about his gym was funny, and a real gym takes away from that, especially when its gimmick is pretty lame. After defeating a trainer, they'll take a step backwards to clear the way forward. Some are skippable, you know, most aren't. I will say the fire design on the floor tiles is pretty rad, but I actually would have preferred less here. Blaine's team is a bit more coherent too. It's still only 3 Pokemon of a type that's bad defensively, but he gives them all White Herb, so when they use Overheat, a powerful move that lowers special attack with the user, they don't have the stat drop the first time. It's a consumable item. They also try to set Sun, somewhat unsuccessfully given how slow most of his Pokemon are. It's a very easy gym, but it's nice to see it being given a gimmick that isn't just Monotype, which is so obviously exploitable that it's a wonder it stuck around for so long. Seafoam Island is back and better than ever. People familiar with the series might know where this cave goes. The cave's layout has been expanded while maintaining the amount of floors. The layout has been made more complex and uses ice sliding those ice blocks from Price's gym for new puzzles to navigate to the lowest floor. And for those who make it, they're rewarded with Articuno. That's right, outside of event Pokemon, every Pokemon from the first 2 generations is available in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And a good handful of Pokemon from generations 3 and 4 are too. Articuno has the unfortunate double Stealth Rock weakness, great special defense won't stop that, or most of its weaknesses, Rock, Steel, but as far as Ice goes, the type is so awful that Articuno is top tier. Okay speed and good special for spamming Ice Beam or Blizzard. Pressure is okay, but Articuno doesn't really have stalling capabilities given it's an Ice type. It'd much rather kill or freeze. Articuno isn't the worst legendary bird, but it's not particularly good either in terms of legendaries. Route 19 has Clamperl as a swarm. Clamperl is a branched evolution both by trade into Huntail if holding the Deep Sea Tooth, and Gorbis if holding the Deep Sea Scale. Clamperl is pure water with shell armor, and it has the stats of a first stage. Both Evos have Swift Swim, great ability. Huntail is good attack and defense, but is slow. Swift Swim gives it a solid 104, but in the competitive sphere of physical water types, that's really not enough. On the other hand, Gorbis maintains solid defense, but focuses on special attack instead of physical. It's got the same speed, but as far as it goes, Gorbis is actually a good choice for a special rain attacker. Not amazing, but really solidly defensive for laying into things with heavy surfs and hydro pumps. The final gym in Viridian has been massively upgraded. In Generation 2, you waltz into Blue's Lego Fort unhindered and fight him. While the new design plays on the spinners that the original gym had, instead of a simple maze, it's a whole floor of spinners that launch the player whichever way they point. It's not too hard to trace a line to the end, but I do think it's nicer than just walking up to him in a hideous green Lego room. Blue's team has some great shit going on too, which helps. His fairly disparate team, 3 different weathers and some questionable moves, has been tied together by a gimmick while still maintaining his original team. He leads as Executor and always tries to start with Trick Room, a field condition that makes slower Pokemon go first in an attempt to make Pokemon that are otherwise kinda bad on his team, Executor, Rhydon, and Machamp, a lot more consistent if allowed to do so. Trick Room does have flaws though. Like Weather, it only lasts 5 turns, and if it doesn't go off, your team is slow and in trouble. Another great thing is his team's abilities, some really wicked ones that help carry the team. Intimidate on Gyarados and Arcanine, No Guard on Machamp, and way better movesets, Stone Edge on Rhydon and Machamp, Dragon Dance on Gyarados, even some cool coverage with Thunder Punch on Machamp and Mega Horn on Rhydon. That is to say, Blue is a great penultimate challenge, and doesn't require as much grinding as the next one. A few more things before Red. Zapdos appears at the Power Plant, the best of legendary birds, and in my opinion, one of the most fun Pokemon in the game, the king of the Rain Team. Zapdos is the king of Rain Team support, given that it has Hurricane and Thunder, which are both 100% accurate in Rain. Unlike its siblings, it doesn't have a 4x Rock weakness. In fact, Electric Flying is a great type, only weak to Rock and Ice, immune to Ground despite the Electric type, 5 resistances. A lot of Rain teams worry about seeing Zapdos as a Rain counter because it can steal the Rain, and there's little recourse outside of Ice moves to deal with it. Good speed, great special attack, a tiny bit of Rain makes this thing a monster, but it's still pretty great without it. Zapdos doesn't really care about pressure, this thing is pure damage, no stall. Beating Blue gives the player access to the final HM, Rock Climb, taken from Generation 4, which lets the player climb certain walls to reach higher or lower areas. It doesn't have much interesting usage, but allows access to some unique encounter headbutt trees throughout Johto. For example, Route 38 has a Burmy tree on a hill. Burmy is pure bug with 3 forms. They're mostly cosmetic and based on where it last battled. Outside causes it to switch to Plant Cloak, in a cave to Sandy Cloak, and indoors to Trash Cloak. It only affects evolution. Burmy is a Caterpie clone with Shed Skin. It's not worth using until it evolves. Burmy is a split evolution based on gender, both at level 20. Females become Wormadam, which permanently match the form that the Burmy was when it evolves, but this time it changes how it plays. Grass Cloak is Bug Grass, Sandy Cloak is Bug Ground, and Trash Cloak is Bug Steel. All 3 have the nothing ability Anticipation. Their types are a mixed bag, and by that I mean Bug Grass is fucking terrible as it was on Parasect with tons of common weaknesses, Sandy still has a lot of common weaknesses but certainly not as bad, and Trash Cloak has the same incredible typing as Scizor and Forretress, only weak to fire and resisting so much shit. They also have slightly different stats and movesets. Plant Cloak is defensive, focusing on special, which oh man, that's a really bad type to be defensive. Growth is a good unique move for it, but Leaf Storm and Razor Leaf do very little for it because of its low attacking stats. Sandy Cloak is defensive with focus on physical. At the very least it gets Stab Earthquake by TM, I guess. Trash has even decent defenses. It gets Iron Head, which is a good move, but Scizor and Forretress are both way better versions of this type in attack and defense respectively. Trash is the best of the 3, but still not great. Meanwhile, all male Burmy become Mothim, who only has 1 form regardless of Burmy's form. It's a slow defensive bug flying type with Swarm. It's fucking awful. The tree in the national park has Cherubi, a pure grass with chlorophyll, good ability, that evolves into Cherrim at level 25. Cherrim has 2 forms. While not in the sun, it's closed up in Overcast form. While in sun, it blossoms into its Sunshine form. This ties into its signature ability Flower Gift, which boosts the attack and special defense of Cherrim and all its allies by 50%. To cut to the chase, in-game and in singles, Cherrim is a funny gimmick for sun teams, but even after the boost it's okay at best. Okay attack and special defense. That said, in doubles, when given some room to set up and a good ally, Cherrim can make other things incredibly strong, especially if they also like being in the sun. I wish it was more usable in game, there just aren't enough double battles, but it's really fun as a gimmicky thing to use in doubles. Cherrygrove has Tailo, more or less Generation 3's Pidgey line, although only 2 stages. At level 22 it becomes Swallow, both of which are normal flying. It's frail but incredibly fast. The line has Guts, if it can get status, it's a good physical sweeper. Flame Orb helps, but Staraptor is largely better without having to rely on that gimmick. And given that this is the late post-game, this is just not going to happen. Cerulean Cave is also back. The color scheme is good, the purple and greenish water make it a bit eerie, the giant maze uses aqua crystals to mark its path. It's really cool, even if the layout hasn't changed much. The basement of the cave has Mewtwo, he's level 70 and really tough, the final catching challenge really. Guard Swap and Power Swap let it steal defense and attack boost, so setting up on it can easily backfire, on top of it just being more than capable of cutting things down. It's an incredible Pokemon still. Pressure couldn't matter less. Mewtwo is incredibly fast and has the second highest special attack in the game, while still having great attack and good defenses. Mewtwo is good enough to take Red alone, given its stats and level it's caught at, by dipping into its massive move pool via TM. If there's a special move on a disc, it probably gets it for some of the best coverage in the series. It's so broken and probably top 3 Pokemon even as of Generation 4. Starting at Route 28, Sneasel appears. Sneasel, maybe more than any other Pokemon, loves the physical special split. Physical Dark Ice is actually usable now with physical moves of both its stabs, which applies even more with its evolution Weavile, same type and one of the few good ice Pokemon, which it evolves into by leveling up while holding the Razor Claw at night. Like with Gligar and Razorfang, this item is locked behind a bunch of frontier grinding. It's possible to immediately evolve a Sneasel, but it's not great against the final opponent. Sneasel has Inner Focus and Keen Eye, both fairly situational, while Weavile has Pressure. Weavile is good offensively, but pretty frail, not a great mix with Pressure. Great speed and attack, plus some tremendous coverage like Low Kick, Priority and Ice Shard, and great new physical stuff like Knock Off and Pursuit. It exists basically as a revenge killer or counter to Ice Weak stuff, which isn't a huge role, but it's a role that it does very well. Mount Silver has been thoroughly overhauled. The original version is pretty underwhelming, no puzzles, nothing interesting to find outside of grinding out a Larvitar, and it's basically a straight path to the end. While still lacking in puzzles, Mount Silver is much more maze-like and has some really cool set-piece moments, transitioning from inside to the outside multiple times during the climb. The lower outside levels are the grassy hillside, while the upper outdoors areas are beautiful snowy spots. The outside even has different encounter tables for each elevation. In one of the optional areas of Mount Silver at the top of a waterfall, Moltres can be found, the final Pokemon before the post-post game. Look, in competitive it's unusable because of sneaky pebbles, but in actuality the typing could be worse. 3 common weaknesses, Rock a double weakness, but 5 resist and immunity. That said, Ho-Oh is just super Moltres. Moltres is fine, its special is great, and its speed is passable, but there are special fire types with way better dual typing that don't crumble to the smallest pebble. As for Red himself, his Pokemon are pretty substantially leveled up, all being in at least the low 80s and running much better sets. His Espeon is dropped for another gift Pokemon, Lapras, which is good for him, as the battle has automatic permanent hail caused by the weather on top of the mountain. Pikachu has Iron Tail to try to ward off ground types a little bit, using it to set up. Lapras, Snorlax, and Blastoise have Blizzard, which is 100% accurate in hail. Snorlax uses Geiga Impact, the physical version of Hyper Beam, alongside Shadow Ball and Crunch for coverage, plus Thick Bat to make it even bulkier. Sleep Powder and Sludge Bomb on Venusaur, Focus Blast on Blastoise. It's a well-balanced, well-made team with a ton of coverage that's really hard to break. Thankfully, Gym Leader rematches are a good place to level up, high level, monotype for easy sweeping, and repeatable infinitely for the time and day that they're available. Red is still a good final challenge. The extra levels make him a bit more grindy, but I think his team setup is really nice, really well thought out, and works fantastically as a good finale to this whole thing. But there's a little more. Heart Gold and Soul Silver also have a post game to cover. Then we'll move on to the very few transfer-only and event Pokemon, conclude, and I'll go to bed. But first, shout out to my teams. In Heart Gold, Typhlosion, Gliscor, Togekiss, Red Gyarados, Blossom, and Ampharos. I feel like this team's pretty self-explanatory. Typhlosion tried to set Sun to boost Blossom when it could. Gliscor is just generally really good and gets to spam Earthquake all over the place. Togekiss I used for Ancient Power, Serene Grace memes, which didn't always work out, but when it did, it worked really well. I also gave it Metronome just to increase the chaos. Gyarados is obviously great, and Ampharos kind of just, it's an electric type. In Soul Silver, I used Feraligatr, Magcargo, Tyranitar, Tangrowth, Honchkrow, and Gengar. I got the Magcargo as the Slugma from the egg in Violet, so I could actually use a slightly different fire type. Feraligatr is my starter and just generally good. Tyranitar is just generally really good. Tyranitar basically carried the whole game. Tangrowth was my sleeper, and also, I didn't really have a good plan for Tangrowth, I just thought it'd be kind of cool to use. Honchkrow was my flyer, and also kind of just really cool. I like Murkrow a lot, I like Honchkrow a lot. And Gengar, of course, was the guy who fast Shadow Balls and Psychics. After clearing Red, the player has the ability to get a few more Pokemon. First from Professor Oak, a Generation 1 starter, Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle. Bulbasaur's line, Ivysaur and Venusaur, is all grass poison, and with all grass starters have the very situational Overgrow. Venusaur is still great, good special attacks, okay speed, and other stats, solid typing. It'd be nicer if it had Chlorophyll, like others of its type combination do, and as such it may be better to run one of those, but good special poison moves, and grass being generally better due to new moves let Venusaur be a nice bulky special attacker, although obviously none of these have any use in game because they come after the entire game is cleared. The Charmander line, including Charmeleon and Charizard, are fire, gaining Flying and Charizard, all have Blaze. Charizard activates Blaze a lot because of Stealth Rocks, which isn't really a compliment. Ignoring Rocks, it's a faster but otherwise moderately weaker Moltres. It's usable but not all that great, as the slightly better Bird is. The Squirtle line, Wartortle and Blastoise included, are all pure water types and have Torrent, of course. Good defenses, not spectacular speed or attacking stats. It's fine, but water type is so competitive that without something more, Blastoise doesn't really stand out yet. From Steven Stone and Silphco, the player gets to choose a Generation 3 starter as well. Treecko is the grass type and remains so through its evolutions, Grovyle at 16 and Sceptile at 36, all with Overgrow of course. Sceptile is extremely weird, but that's probably the curse of being designed pre-physical special split. It's fast, extremely so, faster than most chlorophyll grass types in Sun, and it's a great special attacker, but learns almost exclusively physical moves, including Leaf Blade, which was formerly its signature move. Not that its attack is bad, just a bit mediocre. It's a shame it wasn't made this generation or adjusted to match its more physical gameplay style, especially as it gets False Swipe. Torchic is the fire starter. Upon evolution to Combuskin, it gains the fighting type, and at 36 it becomes Blaziken. All have Blaze, of course. Blaziken really suffers in the same way Sceptile does. It has great stats in both attacks, but it really just needed to be a physical attacker, and have some points in its otherwise mediocre speed. In time, Blaziken gets some really stupid broken shit that makes it great, but here, while it's really good still, isn't optimal in the slightest. Almost every move it learns besides Ember is physical, and in Gen 3, being mixed let it use both stabs. Here, the special stat is mostly wasted. That said, it does get some fantastic moves. Sky Uppercut, Blaze Kick, its former signature move. Brave Bird, it's really good despite its flaws, but the speed really kills it. The water starter is Mudkip. It gains ground upon becoming Marsh Stomp at 16 and becomes Swampert at 36. They have Torrent, obviously. Swampert is worse than it should be. Good attack, but not fantastic. Slow as mud, and really passable everywhere else. Yeah, it has Earthquake and a great type, but we don't exactly have a desperate need for more physical waters, and it's barely better than Quagsire, and honestly probably a little bit worse starting in the next generation. Hell, Muddy Water, its former signature move, isn't even physical. It still relies on Waterfall like everything else. Now for the final few obtainable Pokemon, and a bit of bitching about one-offs. After getting the Kanto starter from Oak, the player can visit Mr. Pokemon, the guy who gave the Togepi egg to them, to either get the blue orb in Heart Gold or red orb in Soul Silver. Taking these to Embedded Tower, a small area outside of the Safari Zone that requires rock climb, causes an encounter. In Heart Gold, Kyogre, pure water and the cover legendary of one of Gen 3's games, Sapphire. Kyogre is probably the best Pokemon in the series at this point, thanks largely to its signature ability Drizzle. As soon as Kyogre is sent in, Endless Rain starts. This ability was made to show how powerful and insane Kyogre was after all. Rain is probably the best of the weathers, boosts Kyogre's stab, and has great synergy with tons of abilities. If Kyogre was available any earlier, it would completely break this game. All of its stats are good, but it has an insane 150 special attack and 140 special defense. This thing borders on unkillable. It's encountered at 50, much lower than the player's level will be, but packs Rest, an incredibly powerful stab that means even being far ahead of it, it's a pretty tough capture. This thing ruled the metagames that allowed it competitively. It's so good, and pure water is generally a great type. Its counterpart from Pokemon Ruby is Groudon, who's good but not quite as much. Its signature ability Drought is the same as Drizzle, but with Sun. Sun is a bit lesser to Rain generally, the fire type doesn't get a lot of synergy with it, and it's almost more of a grass support thing. On top of that, Groudon is pure ground. It doesn't even get stab on its weather boosted fire attacks, despite getting many of them. It serves as an inverse of Kyogre statistically, good everything, great attack and defense, but unfortunately it's almost entirely countered by Kyogre too. It gets Solar Beam to fight it off, but Kyogre's typing beats Groudon and has stab on it. Groudon is still great, very much so. I mean, Earthquake exists, it's just kind of the lesser of the two. Finally, having both, and they have to both be caught from Embedded Tower, no trading up, allows the player to get one final Pokemon. I really don't like this. Legendaries can't breathe, so it takes a lot of generosity or time to get both for one Pokemon. I ended up doing 2 playthroughs of each Heart Gold and Soul Silver for an extra Kyogre and Groudon for living decks, as well as third starters for all 3 available starters, an extra upgrade for Porygon 2 because the game only has 1 for some reason, and another thing I'll touch on in the events section. And that's on me for doing double living decks, but still. Locking one-offs to games is a huge pain, and every game after Gen 2 and this remake does it. I love that the Gen 2 games have both legendaries but lock one in the post-game. It makes for a fantastic post-game task. Anyway, the third Pokemon is the leader of Groudon and Kyogre, and the cover legendary of Emerald, Rayquaza, Dragon Flying. It's said to be the leader of the two because it can control them and their destructive weather, shown through its signature ability Airlock, which is just Cloud 9, it negates weather. And Rayquaza is kinda not that good against the legendaries in gameplay. Kyogre often runs Ice Beam, which completely decimates it. Groudon can't do that much to it, but it can't do that much to Groudon either. That said, it's good in all stats, and both of its attacking stats are fantastic. It's pretty versatile in what it can use, but most frequently it's going to be Dragon Dance, Outrage, and Extreme Speed, the fastest priority move in the game. It's great, no doubt, although the huge ice weakness is a big issue for it, and eventually it becomes the best Pokemon in the game, but that's a ways off too. And that's everything in the game before events and transfers. It's a good portion of the Pokedex, missing only 62 Pokemon out of the then 493, most of which are special Pokemon from Gen 4, their starters and legendaries. Oof. I'll try to be fast, this is long already, I know. Mew is the event legendary from Generation 1. It has Synchronize, which is fun, and it's flat to hundreds in every stat, and learning every TM gives it tons of room to experiment with sets and use anything. There's some fantastic moves in the TM move pool now. It's just a shame that TMs are limited use, and a lot of the good ones will be gone before considering getting a Mew. Gen 2's event legendary Celebi still struggles for its pretty bad grass psychic typing. 7 common weakness is a very big issue, even for something with flat hundreds in each stat. Natural Cure is great, but can't exactly save Celebi. It doesn't have the versatility of Mew. Alright, now we're getting into Generation 3. This stuff is all new, and all only available through transfer. First, Skitty, pure normal, which can be transferred from Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum, but can also be obtained from the Pokewalker, a step-counting device that came with Heart Gold and Soul Silver. It would let players train their Pokemon and find unique encounters items simply by walking around with it in their pockets. This allows Heart Gold and Soul Silver to have almost every Pokemon on the deck through its exclusives, really just missing a few legendaries and of course event Pokemon. It's a cool little addition, but one that doesn't emulate well, as you can imagine. Since I had to emulate to get footage of the games, I did not use the Pokewalker, and I ended up just bringing these things over. Anyway, Skitty becomes Delcatty through the Moonstone. Cute Charm is a good ability, but their signature ability is one of the most interesting in the game. Normalize, which makes all moves they use normal type. They get stab on every move they use, but still keep the same effects of burning, flinching, paralyzing, and whatever else, which is cool given their wide coverage through TM. And Assist, the gimmick they're somewhat built around, which uses a party member's move at random, giving them access to almost anything. That said, Delcatty's stats hold it back. It's mediocre in everything. Perhaps they were scared that making it usable would break it. It doesn't even have solid speed. It's a fun gimmick, but not a good gimmick. Carvanha can be transferred from all the same spots Skitty can, including the Pokewalker and his Water Dark, an okay typing that has some common weaknesses but a lot of resist too. At level 30 it becomes Sharpedo, and the two share a signature ability Rough Skin. Each time a Pokemon makes contact with it through attacking, they take 1/8 of their HP and damage. It's a good bit of chip damage, especially when stacked with Weather Status and breaks Focus Sash, a very common item in competitive. Sharpedo has great attack, a solid competitor for Gyarados, and is fairly fast, but is so frail, which is a shame given its ability. I like using Sharpedo, but it's a risky revenge killer coming in on weakened stuff, not some monster on its own. Physical dart moves like Pursuit are a great benefit for it though. Wilmer can also be transferred from the same source as the previous two lines have been. It's pure water and becomes the game's largest Pokemon, Wailord at level 40. Wailord's design is really nice for just being a whale. Water Veil is okay, but nobody's going to be attempting to burn Wailord. Hell, it's not even a physical attacker, and Oblivious is very situational. Massive health, bad defenses, weird combination, plus passable attack and special attack, but water is too competitive a type to consider Wailord. Phoebus can also be transferred from the same place as the previous. It's pure water, and effectively an exact clone of Magikarp down to having Swift Swim. It evolves by leveling up with Max Beauty. Contests aren't in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, so raising it with Poffins is out of the question, but Daisyo, Blue's sister, can groom a Pokemon once a day and give it a huge boost to its beauty stat as well as its friendship stat. It may take a few days, but it's possible to evolve it. It's too bad this consideration wasn't made for the area-based evolutions. Its evolution, Milotic, is supposed to be a counterpart to Gyarados, and still pretty good. Great special defense on a pure water is a good place to be, and Milotic is very bulky while also having good special attack. Competitive is a good ability, catch and intimidate and get a good special attack boost on top of its already high special attack. Its signature ability Marvel Scale is pretty cool too, a variant on Gut that boosts defense when afflicted with status, making it almost as defensive as it is specially offensive. Hitting it with a Flame Orb might be a little risky, but it does have a lot of bulk and recovery that it could kind of survive through it, and it's not concerned about the attack drop. Fun Pokemon and one of the better of the special water types, of which there are many. Obviously, since it's not available in game, it's a little irrelevant. Castform is a really bad gimmick Pokemon. Like everything previously, it can come from any of the previously mentioned games or the Pokewalker. Its signature ability Forecast switches it between forms with the weather, going from its normal type base form to Sunny and Sun, which is a fire type, Rainy and Rain, which is a water type, and Snowy and Hail, which is an ice type. Weather Ball, formerly its signature move, exists to give it stab regardless of weather by changing types to match Castforms, but Castform just can't live up to its gimmick. An Omni-Weather support could be okay, but most teams only run one weather and need something more specialized. Plus it doesn't even support sand for some reason, not to mention the horrific flat 70s in all stats, somehow implying anyone would ever think to attempt to use a physical cast form. It's bad. Kecleon is slightly less available than the others, needing to be transferred from Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Platinum, or the Pokewalker. Like Castform, it's a normal type with a questionable gimmick, something that happened a lot as the developers were experimenting with abilities when they got introduced. Color changes Kecleon's incredibly poorly thought out signature ability. When hit by a move, Kecleon changes its type to match that move. It's a cute idea for a chameleon Pokemon, but it cuts it off from stab most of the time, and also, as the opponent chooses its type, opening it up to, say, getting hit by a fire move, then immediately by a water move to finish it off. Assuming your opponent has any sense, this is going to be a huge negative to Kecleon in most scenarios. Good special defense and decent attack don't cover the weakness of this ability, let alone its awful speed and bad other stats. Tropius, Grass Flying, is available through the same sources as Kecleon. Like Jumpluff, who it shares its type with, it's a mess of a type with lots of weaknesses, which again isn't going to help as it's supposed to be defensive. Chlorophyll boosts it to a decent speed, but it still can't do anything, and similarly, Solar Power takes it to a tolerable special attack, but still leaves its speed in a bad position. The banana dinosaur thing is completely wasted on Tropius. The bananas hanging from the neck, the palm leaf wings, it's genius. Snorunt is a pure ice type, available through everything, like Skitty and most of the rest were. Snorunt evolves into the also pure ice Glalie at 42, but can alternatively become Frostlass via Dawnstone, but only if female. Snorunt and Glalie share Inner Focus, Situational, and Ice Body, okay recovery and hail, but Glalie's stats leave a lot to be desired, that is to say flat 80s in every stat. Not awful in anything, not specialized in anything. It's hardly worth considering, Ice is a bad type, and Glalie can't do anything more reasonable Ice types can't. On the other hand, Frostlass becomes Ice Ghost, based on a Yukiona like Jinx, and has the fantastic Snowcloak ability. It's an incredibly fast Pokemon, but as a result is even more frail than Glalie, with attacks that are no better, but with Ghost Stab, which is nice. The numerous weaknesses make it a glass cannon, but Ice and Ghost usually are, and it's fast enough to make it a risky consideration, certainly better than Glalie. Now for Generation 3's legendaries that were left behind, starting with the original Regis. Regirock, as well as the other Regis, can be transferred from Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, or Platinum, although they require an event to get in Platinum. Regirock is pure rock with Clear Body, good ability that lets Regirock potentially set up, but the Regis are some of the most mediocre legendaries in the series. Spoilers, Regirock is incredibly slow, its defense is spectacular, its attack and special defense are decent, but Rock has a ton of weaknesses, and Curse, as defensive as it can make it, is so risky given the potential damage off of one super effective special attack like Surf, that it's hardly worth considering using Regirock outside of really gimmicky stall teams. Regice is the Ice Regi, obviously, also with Clear Body, great special defense, good defense, and special attack. Slow and Ice type, if its type was less awful it might be okay, it has pretty good stats, but there are plenty of slow defensive Ice types that are all terrible to play with already. In reality, Regice is kinda okay for what it does, but the thing it does is not that good. Registeel is definitely the best of the three. Pure Steel is a good defensive type, which is kind of the strength of these things. Clear Body works well on it. I used to troll on Showdown with the Registeel, block, rest, defense, curl, amnesia. A good switch in lets this thing stall for 184 turns and made most people caught in it rage quit, which is really funny. It has great stats in both defenses and doesn't need much else. It hardly makes it useful. It's good for stalling, but it can't really do anything. It's very funny. It's just not good. Jirachi is Gen 3's first event legendary, Steel Psychic with Serene Grace. Great type, only weak to ground and fire, it has Mew stats flat 100, so it's pretty versatile, and Serene Grace makes it a riot for Paraflinch strats, which are like Thunder Wave into Iron Head repeatedly to try to prevent the opponent from ever moving again, but it also has lots of coverage to use different gimmicky stuff with Serene Grace too. Its signature move Doom Desire is just a more powerful version of Future Sight. Set it up, then 2 turns later it lands a powerful attack, which is not a good substitute for just doing Serene Grace shenanigans. The other mythical for Gen 3 is Deoxys, which has 4 forms that can be swapped between using the meteors on Route 3. All of them are Psychic type and share Pressure as an ability, which is great on the one that likes stalling and way too slow on the others. The DNA theming is really sick. Anyway, each form has different stats and a few different moves. Normal Deoxys has 150 attack, special attack, and speed. The rest of its stats are 50s. It's a glass cannon, and remember, this is the most balanced one. It doesn't really get anything other forms don't, but it's also possible to drag moves between the forms to mix and match. Attack form does what it says on the tin, it drops its already paltry defense for even more attack. It's great, basically broken, and gets a few moves the others don't have to help. Superpower for fighting coverage, keep in mind these guys all get a bunch of coverage from TMs too. Zap Cannon and Taunt to shut down setup. It's great, it's basically a better version of normal. It's already a glass cannon, so becoming more of a glass cannon isn't really gonna hurt it. Defense form also basically does what it says on the tin, both of its defenses are incredible, which is great on pure Psychic, but in return it loses a fair bit of speed to just become alright, and its attacking stats take a hit. Defense loves pressure, but still hits fairly hard too. It can sit around and stall, pass out hazards, it gets Spikes as a unique move, as well as Iron Defense and Amnesia, and Counter and Mirror Coat, maybe the most incredibly defensive Pokemon in the game. Speed Deoxys is the fastest Pokemon in the game. This makes it an amazing lead, but its attacks and defenses are evened out in return. Good stats and all, but not as specialized. That said, it makes for a really good suicide lead, plus it gets double team and extreme speed. All of them are amazing indisputably. All forms of Deoxys also have access to a signature move, Psycho Boost, which is a psychic variant of Overheat, which is really strong but lowers special attack after use. Good, but Deoxys is strong enough to not have to rely on it. Basically any of the forms are really good, speed and attack especially, but defense definitely has its niche in stalling. Now for the Gen 4 transfers and events. The starters obviously need to be transferred from Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum. Turtwig is the grass starter and becomes Squirtle at 18, then Torterra at 32, whereupon it gains ground. Overgrow, of course. Lots of common weaknesses, 4 times ice is painful. Well, kinda lacking in resist. That said, I don't care. The design is so fucking good. Bonsai Island Turtle, it's fucking genius. Defense and attack are good, but the low speed kinda hurts. That said, it gets Earthquake and Curse, which basically validates its existence. Chimchar is the fire starter, it evolves into Monferno at 14 and gains Fighting, then at 36 into Infernape. As for the fire-fighting combo again, I don't know what they're thinking, and it's not just 2 in a row, the next fire starter also is firefighting. It's just a type they liked a lot, I guess. The line has Blaze, etc. It's a fast mixed attacker, but a good one at that. It relies mostly on physical stuff, but has some clutch special moves through TMs as coverage, and fighting is a great type this generation. Close combat, Mach Punch, some dark coverage, lots of fire stuff, even gets Calm Mind to support the special playstyle. Great Pokemon to use besides being transfer only. Lastly, the water line with Torrent, of course. Piplup evolves into Prinplup at 16, then again into Empoleon at 36, which gives it Steel as a secondary type. As type combos with Steel tend to be, it's a great pairing. 11 resists and 1 immunity. It's okay defensively and good special defensively, and as a special attacker otherwise. Its only real use for its Steel typing offensively is Flash Cannon via TM, but it's a water type special attacker through and through. It just needs to spam Surf, and it's a good Pokemon outside of low speed. Next up, Gen 4's fossils. These can technically be revived at Pewter Museum, but the fossils need to be transferred over first. Cranidos or its fossil need to be either transferred from Diamond or Platinum. Cranidos is pure rock and becomes the big brain boy Ramparados at 30. Moldbreaker is good, lets it Earthquake Levitators, but it's a bit dependent on what the opponent is doing. Cranidos or its fossil need to be either transferred from Diamond or Platinum. They have fantastic attack, but they're pretty frail and slow. It can do great damage if it survives a hit, but it isn't particularly capable of doing so. It's basically fun but situational as a teammate at best. Shieldon and its evolution Bastiodon, which it becomes at level 30, the new lower level for fossil evolutions. Both are steel rock like Aggron, but outside of the Titanic fighting and ground weaknesses, the type is fairly solid and Bastiodon's defenses are both fantastic, while every other stat is terrible and it doesn't do anything but block. Sturdy is a non-ability in this generation and doesn't do much for it. Now for some normal Pokemon, starting with Shellos, which has 2 forms. They're identical except for appearance. West Sea Shellos comes from the west side of Sinnoh and is pink, East from the east is blue. West Sea can be gotten from the Pokewalker, transferred over from Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum, while East Sea must come from Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum, it's not available in the Pokewalker. Both evolve into Gastrodon at level 30 and match the form of their pre-evolutions, West Sea and East Sea Gastrodon. The form is supposed to match the color of the parent, but for some reason all Shellos hatched in Heart Gold and Soul Silver come out West Sea, which is probably some kind of oversight. Shellos is pure water, while Gastrodon gains ground. Water ground is still great, but Gastrodon is pretty mediocre. Good HP for bulk, but very slow with mediocre special attack as its next highest stat. Sticky Hold is a good ability preventing it from dropping items, which is always useful, while Storm Drain is interesting. It's Lightning Rod for water moves. In this generation, like with Lightning Rod, it doesn't negate damage, but Gastrodon can kinda bulk it even on neutral damage. Drifloon needs to be transferred from Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum, and is Ghost Flying. 3 immunities is good, 5 weaknesses is much less so. Drifloon becomes Drifblim at level 28. Great HP, mediocre speed, okay attacks, bad defenses. I don't really know what it's supposed to do before its abilities go off, but it's fun to mess around with, and the abilities are interesting. Aftermath causes a Pokemon that knocks it out to lose 1/4 of its HP. It's kinda busted as a bit of revenge for getting knocked down, and very funny, while Unburden doubles its speed if it consumes or loses its item. Eating a berry or having something knocked off or anything like that pushes it to a massive 160 speed, which makes it incredibly fast, but it's still not that great of an attacker. High enough speed that if paired with a boosting berry, it could maybe do some sweeping with a lot of work. Glameow needs to be transferred from Pearl, the only place it's available. It's pure normal and evolves into Purugly at level 38, and ugly is right. Glameow is Limber, okay but a bit situational, and Own Tempo, which is also situational. While Purugly trades Limber for Thick Fat. Funny and good for some extra resists. Despite the weight, it's surprisingly fast, but it can't do much besides that. Everything else is really mediocre. As a counterpart to Glameow, Stunky needs to be transferred from Diamond and has the incredible Poison Dark type like Drapion, only weak to ground. Stunky evolves at 34 into Skuntank, it has Aftermath, funny ability to use against others, annoying to have used against you, as well as Stench, which is virtually useless in this generation. Skuntank has mediocre flat stats and isn't good as much of anything outside of Aftermath memes, as well as having some funny joke coverage like Flamethrower because it farts. Spiritomb can be transferred from Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, or the Pokewalker. Like Sableye, it's Ghost Dark. No weaknesses, but more intentionally stally. It has pressure and good defenses, with moderate attack, but low speed. Pass Wonder Guard to it, and it does the same thing as Sableye. Otherwise, it's okay defensively, it's lacking in recovery, but the typing is fantastic. Finneon is pure water and can be transferred from Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, and Pokewalker. It evolves into Lumineon at level 31. Storm Drain isn't great in this generation, although Lumineon resists water anyway. Meanwhile, Swift Swim makes it incredibly fast, 182 speed and rain. That said, it's still mediocre, and good water types are in no shortage, especially ones that run Swift Swim. Snover's Grass Ice can be obtained by transfer from Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, and the Pokewalker. At 40 it becomes a bonus now. As a Hail Pokemon, it's basically a necessity. Snow Warning, its signature ability, summons endless Hail on Switch. It's the crux of Hail teams. That said, Hail sucks, and Ice Grass is a horrifically bad type, 7 weaknesses, only 4 resists, and Abomasnow has very mixed, mediocre stats. It's the best Hail Pokemon, and still not particularly good. Rotom is Electric Ghost, good type, especially with Levitates, 3 immunities, 5 resists, and only 2 weaknesses. It has 6 total forms. In later generations, they're all different types, but in this game, they're all Electric Ghosts, distinguished by stats and a unique move each. Rotom can swap between the forms in the basement of Silphco, which can only be accessed by walking with a Rotom to the elevator. Also, Rotom is extremely cute, but Ghost is my favorite type, so I'm kinda biased. Despite its type, Rotom's normal form is pretty bad. Low stats, but okay special attack and speed. It could be worse, but it could be better. All 5 of its alternate forms are a bit better, and they all have the same increased stats. Good defenses and special attack at the cost of a minor speed decrease. Not great, but definitely more serviceable, and in the next generation, when they get their own unique types, they all become a lot better. Rotom Heat gets Overheat, which is an okay move, but none of these are going to be Stab. Rotom Wash gets Hydro Pump, which is good coverage when it hits, but again, it's not Stab. Rotom Frost gets Blizzard, which is also good coverage when it hits and has a chance of freezing. Rotom Fan gets Air Slash, which isn't a very good move, and Rotom Mow has Leaf Storm, which is okay, but not great. Alright, we're getting close, we just have the legendaries left, and then we're all done. The only problem is there's a lot of fucking legendaries. First, the Lake Trio, who can all be transferred from Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum. The whole set appear Psychic with Levitate, with really only minor differences between them. Uxie has decent speed and great defenses. It's a good stall Pokemon with a good typing, and really doesn't do much beyond that. Some decent Psychic attacks if it has to, but mostly just there to stall. Mesprit has good stats across the attacks and defenses and decent speed. It's most notable as a Pokemon for fucking up the Battle Tower, trick a Choice Scarf onto an opponent, paralyze it with Thunder Wave, maybe flash a little bit or use Charm to lower its special attack, then set up with something better and sweep. That said, Mesprit can actually do some decent special attacking against things with Psychic Stab. Azelf is the offensive one, great attacking stats and speed. It's pretty frail, but another good fast Psychic that does well in attacking, and it's my favorite of the 3 in design and usage. The next 3 are available in Heart Gold and Soul Silver through Event. Taking an Arceus to the Runes of Elf transports the player to Sinjoh Runes. I'll get to Arceus soon, but this event can be done twice, once with an Event Arceus, and another with an Arceus caught through Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum's unreleased Hall of Origin event, allowing each save file to get 2 of these 3. Upon going to Sinjoh Runes, an event plays out where the player watches a bunch of stock images flip by, then gains one of the following 3 Pokemon by choice. They're given at level 1, so it could be pretty fun to get them through the event at the start of the game and take them through everything. Dialga is Steel Dragon with Pressure, a fantastic type, 11 resists and immunity and only 2 weaknesses, on top of incredible fucking stats, 150 special attack, 120 in the physicals, 100 special defense, and even decent speed. It's another top 5 Pokemon and has great access to a bunch of moves too, even having a signature Dragon-type Hyper Beam variant called Roar of Time, on top of other great Dragon and Steel moves to use. Palkia also has a great type, Water Dragon, same as Kingdra with only a weakness to Dragon, and Pressure as an ability. Amazing special attack, great attack, and special defense, good speed. It's nearly as good as Dialga, maybe better offensively because there's so many good special water moves to use. Plus a great Dragon type move in Spatial Rend, which is 100 base power with high crit rate, which is fucking insane if it goes off. Finally, there's Giratina, Ghost Dragon with 2 forms, normally in its altered form, but in its origin form while holding the Grizius Orb. The origin form is cut off from using an item, but it's generally much better in stats and has Levitate instead of Pressure, which is generally better, even though Giratina likes Pressure as it is pretty defensive. Altered Giratina has amazing HP and great defenses, with good attack and passable speed. Its typing isn't as great as the other 2, but its weaknesses are uncommon and its resistances are fairly common. Origin Giratina swaps its attack and defenses, and both are pretty good offensive types. Shadow Force is its signature move that is a strong Ghost type attack, but acts like Fly where it has a semi-invulnerable turn beforehand, so it's slow and predictable. Regardless, it can pop out some nasty Shadow Balls. Gen 4 has so many legendaries, but we're almost there. Heatron, Fire Steel, great type of course, especially with Flash Fire for a boost if possible, and another immunity. 10 resists, 2 immunities with Flash Fire, and only 3 weaknesses. The ground one is pretty devastating as it's a double weakness, but it's a very hard to break type, especially given its great defenses and special attack. The speed is a bit mediocre, but Heatron is so hard to kill that it hardly matters, and when it shoots fire it goes really fucking hard. Its signature move Magma Storm is a much stronger version of Fire Spin, dealing residual damage over time, which, I mean, it's hard to complain about. It can be transferred from Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum Platinum, and fun fact, is one of the only legendaries that can either be male or female. Regigigas was a mistake. Designed to be the head of the Regis and requiring transferring them to Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum to get before transferring to Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and with good stats, especially on a plain normal type, who should be able to use some really powerful coverage and make huge hits. Statistically, it would be good, great attack, good speed, and defenses. It should be a solid all-around for formats with legendaries, but, and it's a giant but, it was slapped with a huge negative ability out of fear it would be broken, and for the lore of the Regis waking up. Its signature ability Slow Start halves its speed and attack to miserable levels for the first 5 turns it's sent out. This counter resets if it's switched out, so Regigigas has to find a way to stall for an entire 5 turns to start being good. A wait so long that will almost certainly not survive, and which makes it borderline unusable despite great stats. Crush Grip, Regigigas' signature move, deals more damage to targets with higher health. It's pretty decent, but Stab Return is almost as powerful and not as restrictive. Cresselia is a pure psychic with Levitate, as if Gen 4 needed a 4th legendary like that. It's extremely defensive, basically a super Mesprit. It's good, yeah. It can be transferred from Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum, and has a signature move Lunar Dance, which knocks out Cresselia to fully heal, restore the PP of, and cure the status of the Pokemon that replaces it. It's a good heal if you don't mind the loss. Now we're finally on to the last of the event legendaries, and there's still a few to go. Manaphy can be obtained by transferring its egg from the Pokemon Ranger spin-off games. Yeah, I know, it's weird. It has Muse Flat 100s in stats, it's water type, and has Hydration, a great ability. It gets Tail Glow for fat special attack boost, and can use its signature move Heart Swap to steal an opponent's boost or swap negative boost to them. It's a good Pokemon, it's got funny uses and solid stats, but again, Kyogre is the premier water legendary. Manaphy is also the only legendary that can breed, but it doesn't produce more Manaphy, it makes Fione. Basically a lesser Manaphy that doesn't evolve back into it. Pure water, hydration, and a mediocre 80 in all stats. An interesting gimmick, but virtually useless when compared to Manaphy. These last 3 are event only, no transfers. Darkrai is pure dark and is really gimmick focused around sleep. Its signature move Dark Void has a very good 80 accuracy for a sleep move, while also hitting all adjacent Pokemon for double shenanigans, which is meant to pair with its ability Bad Dreams, which drains 1/8 of the sleeping Pokemon's HP per turn. It's a cheap trick, but really unique and fun to use, but it also has great speed and special attack on top of the gimmick to bring some nasty dark pulses out. Great Pokemon. Shaman has 2 forms, which you can switch to with the use of the Gracidia flower, which can be obtained by showing Shaman to the lady in the Goldenrod flower shop. It remains in its 2nd form until it's deposited in the PC when night falls or frozen mid-battle, which is pretty ouch. Its land form is pure grass with natural cure, solid ability, and has Mew stats. It's not amazing, but it's certainly okay. Its signature move Seed Flare is really cool though, an extremely powerful grass move that has a 40% chance of lowering the opponent's special defense by 2 stages. Having it the first time it's used, really extremely fucking strong when it goes off, which leads into its other form, Shaman Sky. Shaman Sky gains the flying type to become a pretty mediocre grass flying, but also changes its ability to Serene Grace. 80% on those Seed Flares is nuts. The typing is pretty bad, and it doesn't really get moves to use its flying types with, but its stats have been more specialized, so it's super fast and has great special attack. If it was a better type and didn't run the risk of reverting back to the more mediocre land form, it'd be pretty good. As it stands though, it's just kinda decent. And finally, we have Arceus, statistically the strongest Pokemon in the game, and still the strongest that doesn't use Megas or other alternate forms added later. Arceus' ability Multi-Type changes its form based on the plate it holds. There's 1 plate for every type except for normal. Arceus is normal when it's not holding an item or holding any other type besides the plates. As such, it has a form for every type for a total of 17, and on top of that, the plates also naturally boost the power of the type that they match by 20%. Really good considering Arceus' signature move Judgment changes type to match Arceus. It's 100 base power and 100% accurate, always gets stab, and almost always gets the boost from a plate, save when it's in normal form. There's also a secret 18th Arceus for the question mark type, which exists only for the move Curse. It's not available in game and only exists to prevent crashing by hacking Arceus to question mark type. Arceus has 120 in every stat and tons of coverage, but really it just needs to pick a type, just shit out powerful judgments all day. Steel type is especially good because Steel's just a really good type, flying, fire, whatever type you need, anything, it can cover anything. It's the ultimate Pokemon if all you want is just to completely terminate your opponents. And that's finally everything. Before I close though, manga time. The Heart Gold Soul Silver chapter is really strange, and it seems to exist more out of obligation over having interesting things going on. We return to Gold, Silver, and Crystal exploring the Pokeathlon Dome and Safari Zone looking for Arceus plates. Because so much of GSC was ignored in the original chapters, it also covers the Rocket Return stuff with the new admins. The whole arc is brief. The heroes chase Arceus around and gather the plates in under 20 chapters. There aren't even that many battles, which is a shame because they're usually great and special. The conclusion has cool moments. The group and Rockets end up in Sinjo, the ruins where Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina are obtained in the games, and Arceus Arceus summons all three for the Rockets, while Lance, Giovanni, and Price, who's brought back by Celebi to help, join the heroes to prevent the world from getting destroyed by the new Rockets. The ideas are cool, but it's really rushed. Even though the finale is half the arc, very little happens in it, and the conclusion is Arceus deciding humanity is okay after seeing Gold's Togepi evolve into Togekiss. After everything's revolved, Giovanni goes to reform the Rockets, which is a plotline that still hasn't been followed up on as far as I know. Maybe they'll come back to it with the brilliant diamond shining pearl stuff, I don't know. It's an interesting angle to take, finishing up the storyline from the game and playing into the Shinjo stuff, but it moves so fast it comes off as contrived and rushed. It's not even like it's bad, the art is still really good, and the fights that are there work. It's just not fleshed out enough as the original chapters were. Oh, fucking hell, let's just finish this. Heart Gold and Soul Silver are big fucking games, tons to do, tons to see. Gold, Silver, and Crystal were already the longest in the series, and Heart Gold and Soul Silver add more. The game is gorgeous and the music is too. Amazing sprite art, beautiful locations. Johto and all its unique features and Japanesey design are brought to life by it, and even Kanto lives up better to its urban and suburban style through small touch and loving details. The game is crafted to fit everything in so naturally, and I think the only stumble is the horrible, tedious, and time-consuming Safari Zone. It's basically a perfect remake, lovingly recreating what made Gold, Silver, and Crystal so great already, and carefully adding a ton more that feels natural and expands the great parts. It's especially good to see Gold, Silver, and Crystal's few faults smoothed out. Kanto is not only restored to how it was, but made into the best version of itself. While not exclusively a part of Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the new battle mechanics really spice things up too. I don't love natures and EVs, but abilities and tons of new moves add a bunch of depth, as well as the physical special split fixing a lot of previously bad Pokemon. The game also has tons of fun events that have been added in, like the Kyogre and Groudon and Embedded Tower event, and the Roaming Lottie, and everything that comes together in a way that's kind of hard to describe in that it's basically just the perfect Pokemon game. You know, if there weren't any exclusive legendaries, or, I mean, preferably no exclusives. The two version thing's always been kind of dumb, but really, it's hard to find many faults in this game. It's clearly made with a lot of passion and care for the originals, serves as a really good companion piece for them, and I've gone on way too long. I really love and think that Heart Gold and Soul Silver are great. I love and think that Gold, Silver, and Crystal are great. I probably went too deep on explaining things. This is going to be extremely long, and I'm very exhausted. I'm sure you're very exhausted. I need some time away from Pokemon. More videos soon. Next up will be a fast-paced fighting crossover. Thanks for suffering through this with me, or, you know, not. Yeah, I'm gonna be so fucking worn out working on this. It's gonna take fucking forever, but hopefully it's worth it. Okay, bye.